ready to report it tonight in about a couple of hours?
I've read 15 pages of it,
So,
and there seems to be something about we may have a problem reducing the sales tax if we want to be eligible for it.
say what now?
We may not be able to lower the sales tax to be eligible for the money.
Who's saying that? We're not lowering the sales tax.
Well,
We're not. We are just giving it a vacation.
yeah, well, I have a grand desire not to go to jail.
Well, that sounds
So-
like narrow-minded of you, Mr. Stone.
But I'm just gonna give, fair warning, not saying you shouldn't pass for first reading tonight. But we'll have more definitive information because we have a meeting on Wednesday. About. And part of my argument is going to be, you're doing it for financial stimulus.
Are you making all those fun noises?
Yeah. Oh, hit the blue button.
Still made the same sound.
Got it.
Well, we need a couple more people.
Doug? Got 3 of us?
Yeah.
Doug is on there. Adam is not gonna be here for the work session. And he may not be here for the meeting. He's flying back tonight, I think.
And what about Megan?
I have not heard from Megan. I expect her.
I texted with her earlier, but it wasn't about the meeting, so. So I know she's around.
Here she is. So is Gerald. Welcome. I was wondering if you were coming. You walked in perfect timing.
Hey.
Like,
Lou, are you all set for Thursday?
Mondays are so horrible.
Oh, yeah.
They're so horrible, Mom. I'm like,
Yeah.
doesn't think it's worse as you become an adult. Sounds like Adam's not going to be here right away.
Plus, got 5 or 6.
Okay, cool. Well, subject to the work session tonight is continuation of city budgets and let's go ahead, sir.
Start with the port operating fund, and then go and look at the rest of the budget if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
So that is on page 23.
Okay.
22, it actually opens up on 22.
All right. And is this a tag team with Joy and Nikki or?
Well, I think Nikki tagged Joy, but I think she's going to open up. Nikki's going to open
Okay.
up.
Hey, Nikki, we're ready.
Okay, so we're going to start with the port operating fund on page 22. In the revenue, overall revenue before transfers is projected at $2,150,250, an increase of approximately 12% in comparison with the F21 original budget before fund balance appropriation. Causeway facility revenue is projected to increase a total of $184,000, an increase of approximately 18.8%. The increase is reflected in wharfage dry for an increase of $10,000, wharfage gravel for an increase of $300,000, and these are both due to projects. And fuel is projected at a decrease of $116,000. Harbor facility revenue is projected to increase $72,000 due to an increase in gravel and storage rental. And industrial park facility revenue is projected to decrease $15,000. This projection is based on F20 actuals and the F21 trend. Interest earnings are projected at a decrease of $9,500 as investment rates are down. Our current investments are at 0.05%. Fund balance appropriation is zero. This budget is projecting a revenue surplus of $1,884. On page 23, this is just a breakdown of those revenue accounts. Causeway facility at a total of $1.1 million. Harbor facility at $513,500. Industrial park facility at $440,000. On page 24, other miscellaneous revenue, a total of $9,250. Interest earnings, $12,500. And contributions other at $15,000. It makes for the total revenue of $2,150,250. Are there any questions on revenue?
Interest? I understand the interest being lower because of interest rates, but whether there must be less money in one of the funds or something as well, or?
We do have $250,000 pending for reinvestment.
And where's,
We had been lucky. One of our investments was still at 2.5% until May, and now they're going back to 0.05%.
That's the problem.
I see.
And the contractor equipment stuff projected in here that takes into account CNIC and the road stuff that they're going to be up to.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other question? Sorry. Apologize. Any other questions on the revenue side?
This is a dumb question, but Cape Nome Quarry, what is it? Why is it all blank? Is it just a holdover line item, or trying to understand what that's all about?
Joy,
Would
did
you like
hear
me to take
question?
that? Yes. Councilman Topcock, that is based on the city owning the Cape Nome Quarry jetty facility, not the quarry itself, but the jetty. And there have been times where we have had business traffic down there and discharges for road projects in which we're allowed to charge dockage and wharfage. But anything moving in and out for the quarry to mine the material is at no charge based on a tripartite agreement signed in 1986. Once in a while, we have to send a contractor down there to survey. So you'll see a corresponding section in the expense side with a few expenses, but for the most part, it's a zero section of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so on page 25 for the port operating expenses, Overall expenditure before transfers is projected at $1,553,829, an increase of approximately 1.3% compared to the F21 original budget. Transfers out of $594,536 to port capital projects for non-grant related expenses and grant match contributions. Contribution to fund balance is $1,885. Total expenditures after transfers is $2,150,250. Causeway facility expense is projected at $447,471, an increase of about $30,226 compared to the F21 original budget. There are some small decreases in labor and benefits. Audit fees decreased $2,250. Equipment maintenance decreased about $500. And there's increases in legal services and road maintenance material of $3,500 combined. We're also right now projecting $35,000 allocation to capital improvements. And we did this because of trying to push the revenue surplus into capital improvements. But I learned just before the meeting that the anode project is going to be pushed to F22, and that's going to make a difference on what dollars are available for revenue surplus. So that might be coming out. In harbor facility expense, it's projected at $198,907, an increase of approximately $27,543. Increase in building insurance of $3,293, and this is still based on F21 rates. Docks and foundations of $7,000 and garbage increases at $2,500. Decreases in labor and benefit allocation of about $2,450, and a decrease in land and buildings of $2,500, and a decrease in machinery and equipment of $15,000. And again, having that same projection of $35,000 to capital improvements, which will most likely be changing. Industrial park facility expense is projected at $144,574, an increase of $21,426. Increases in engineer services of $12,000, other professional services of $3,000, and road maintenance materials of $10,000, and a decrease in building materials of $3,500. Port admin expense is projected at $760,370, a decrease of approximately $58,646. In salary and benefits, there is a 20% cost share with finance and a 12% cost share with IT. And in salary and benefits, there's also a decrease of $51,146 for allocations to port grants of $41,700, and a decrease in finance wage allocation of $6,400. And the harbor master assistant is projected for 6 months. That's a decrease of $9,800. There's a decrease in audit fees for $2,500, land rental for $3,000, travel for $2,500, machinery and equipment $500, and an increase in gas for $1,000. If we go to page 26 and 27, it's the details of the Causeway Department expenses for a grand total of $447,471. And on pages 28, this is a CBPV operating maintenance fund that we would set up if we were planning to do some maintenance, but we're not this year. On page 29 is the harbor budget for $198,907. And page 30 is the Nome facility query that we do have some placeholders there in case we have any of those expenses for $2,500. Page 31 for the industrial park facility on page is $144,574. And page 32 for port admin at $760,375. And on page 33, you see the total expenses before transfers at $1.5 million. And then the transfers out of $594,536, shows that contribution to fund balance at $1,885 for a grand total of $2,150,250. Are there any questions about port expense?
I have a question. We have discussed the capital improvements. So this $70,000, it looks like you have split between the harbor facility and the causeway. You said something about an anode project being pushed up. Is that going to negate that need for that money? Because I thought that the conversation was that we were only going to put money into the capital funds if there was a surplus in the port operating budget. But you're making it sound like that might not happen.
Correct. We have $187,000 set aside for causeway docks for the replacement of the anodes and $96,640 for the fish dock. And Port Director Baker might have some more information, but it sounds like that's not starting until August. And so we'll have to add those expenses in. It will increase the transfer out and it will take away the revenue surplus.
Okay, so if that occurs, the goal is not to put that money into the capital improvements, correct?
Well, let me answer a little bit of that. The Port Commission has requested that the city council, or common council, excuse me, show that money is being set aside for the capital projects. And I'm the messenger here. And when we were doing this budget, we thought we were going to have a $70,000 surplus with what we knew at this time. That doesn't mean that at the end of the year, there could be that $150,000 that they want to set aside. Now, the question it comes down to is, okay, do we say, all right, we're going to put this money here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nikki, and show a higher level of general fund contribution in at this point. So, I mean, that's a I don't know if I would call accounting. It's maybe a political decision, but Nikki, am I correct that the fund balance appropriation would be higher if those other two projects go through?
Yes, it will be. We will have a fund balance appropriation.
Okay, but wasn't the conversation something along the lines of why are we going to give the port money that belongs to the city to sit in their savings account when it belongs to the city, because they always have to ask for operating budget at the beginning of every year from the city? And so we weren't going to entertain this, and now it's here again. Same conversation, just a different year.
Well, it is there because it was asked and requested by.
It was asked for last year, and we already had this discussion last year.
But last year you were looking at putting a much larger sum of money in. This year it's not as bad.
It's still a sum of money that they don't.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that's being said. From what their perspective is of this is, look, they think, as they tell their members, their port users, the reason why we raised our fees was to create a capital fund. Because they apparently, and Joy can correct me, apparently they had a large surplus, which was in their reserves there, and they turned around and a couple of these projects spent that money down very quickly. They, as fiduciaries, are looking, okay, let's budget $150,000. Now, if we push money to them and they have a surplus, they got to pay us back. And they're not getting much more money than we are. Right now, they're going to get that same 0.05% that we are. Do you have any comment, Joy? You've gone silent there.
I'm listening to what I'm trying to follow the logic. And I know there are some members on the Port Commission that have been wanting to start a capital improvements fund. that we can push money to. But of course, when it comes down to it, it's the council's decision if they want to approve the budget that way, while we still are asking for the general fund use balance to balance our budget. I guess I've always seen it as we raised fees to keep up with the costs of operating and to set money aside for future repair and maintenance, which is how every facility should operate, and which is how the city operates too. We got to be able to maintain the infrastructure, but I think we need to be in a fiscal position to where our budget shows a surplus every year without upfront from the council, and then that fund use balance or capital improvements account, whatever you want to call it, we'll start building like it did before, because we are operating with rates that are more commensurate to our expenses. So we are incrementally building a repair and maintenance fund each year, like we did for the first 20 years the facility was in operation.
So I guess what I'm seeing here on the port expense, say they want to, well, the budget as it's presented here, if we take out the cost share for DOT of $330,000 and we take out the grant match, EDA match of $246,000, the port fund would have that amount of money that would be in their surplus, which would give them the $150,000. But they're choosing to spend $600,000 right now. So I guess the port is making money, but they're also investing more in capital this year. So it's like, if you could put that 150 into a capital fund, and then you could appropriate it back out to make these matches. But essentially, what's occurring is that, based on the fees, the 300 or 600 and something thousand or 500, whatever it is, those two numbers are being covered by the operating budget.
Right, but according to what Nikki said, if I understand this correctly, there are two projects coming up that may be pushed to this year versus something that we thought was going to happen later and eat away at the surplus that was going to be realized. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, it's going to increase the transfer out to the capital projects fund. It's going to take away the revenue surplus, and it's going to take transfer from savings to cover the balance of the budget.
Right, so my question is, we had this discussion last year, like, why are we going to put that money in the port capital improvements fund when we know they're already going to spend it and they're not going to have any revenue left to do that with? Why are we trying to, isn't that what budget amendments are for? Like, if there's something that comes up later on, then that's what happens. Like, why are we trying to front load a debt to ourselves to the port? I thought the whole point of that capital improvements project was to capture their surplus.
They, as a port commission, have requested, and we went through this last year, and I went through it when they were discussing this. The port commission has requested that we start showing money going in. Now, when this budget was put together, these two projects were not on the table. And the other question is, are these two projects going to go forward this year based on everything else that's going on in the world, whether people are going to be interested? Remember, we are having a paving project at the port, the dock project, because we couldn't get any bidders last year. And, And now the project is supposed to start in, was it 21, 22? Joy?
I can provide some details here. We're talking about a multitude of projects here. DOT project, that 329 cost share the mayor was mentioning, is a project that we were supposed to pay that cost share this fiscal year, F21. But the state has now indicated that they will ask for that in F22, July. So of course that shifted over and ate up some surplus. And then there is the EDA match that Mr. Mayor mentioned that we are already contractually obligated, as with the DOT match. And that will not start until July with the ramp repair. So a good portion of that will be matched in F22. The anodes project, we are already committed to and have signed a contract and awarded the work to Global Diving and Salvage, who have indicated now that we agreed with them that they will move their schedule to do the work in August. So we're already committed to that work. Just found that out today, and that's how I advised Nikki that 187 and that 96,000, that will need to be rolled over to F22. So you're right, that essentially wipes out all of the surplus for next, at least the projected surplus at this time. What it does is change the bottom line of what F21 is going to end up. It's highly likely we're going to have a surplus in F21, and based on where we stand with what we owe the city in reimbursements, I could see that amount of surplus going into a capital improvements fund at that time on the balance sheet, which is, I think, one of the other ways we talked about doing it.
So based on all this happening today, and we put this to the council on Friday, what is the surplus that is estimated for the 2021 budget year?
That would take a little number crunching, but I'm sure it could come up with something while we're still in the work session.
Because there's another method behind this that you can use, is you can assign the surplus for the port to the port for the next fiscal year, which is be 2022. So if
To show that forward.
you know,
Got it.
there's 400,000, then they have that surplus of 70,000.
Okay.
I mean,
I
that
would
is
like to see
a,
something like that versus trying to do what they're trying to do, I guess, at this point. So, that's just my personal opinion. I don't know what the rest of you think about it, but I just think that's more fiscally responsible for our city right now. And I get what the port wants, and they've wanted it for a few years, it sounds like, but it doesn't sound like it's a feasible option right now for the city of Nome.
well, they have a lot of projects going on.
And I get that.
And, projects were supposed to happen last year, now this year, and I'm sure some of these are going to happen in 2023 at this point. However, the Port Commission, one of the issues that we have discussed with them, and almost to the level of argument with them, is there was a mindset that any surplus was going back into the general fund
Of the city.
of the city.
Cities.
And we're saying no, and they will show us where the money is. And as you have done in this organization, you have created separate accounts, even though your accounting system is sophisticated enough not to have all these separate bank accounts or CD accounts. But everybody wanted to see the CDs that were in the Port Commission or in this fund or that fund because of whatever misunderstanding of how the city had been operating. So this is where we are at this point, but I do think, based on what Joy has just talked about, that is probably the cleaner way that they can see, okay, we've had a surplus, it's being carried forward.
Right. I think that would be a much more transparent way of doing things.
Well, historically, the reason it came up to answer your question, I think help answer the question is that for years and years, Joy would go to the Port Commission, who was supposed to basically make recommendations to the city council on budgets and other things. And there were rate studies done and whatnot that basically said that we should be charging more at the port than what we're doing. But the Port Commission said, no, we're not getting increased services, we're already paying enough for our type of what we have going on here, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, they decided that because of the maintenance projects that are coming up now, that they should be putting more money away for maintenance. And so in order to justify raising the fees to people, they said, well, if we could say, well, this is going to go back into the port in this maintenance fund, it more justifies the tariffs going up or the rates going up, basically. So that's why that's coming from. Otherwise, we might not have a tariff increase because the Port Commission would say, no, we don't recommend that. And the city council could still go with a tariff increase.
And how do you put money aside when you still owe other people money? Like, how do you say when you owe? Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Payday loan, essentially.
Right, exactly. But at the city's general fund expense, that's my point. Like, why are we putting our general fund in their pocket when it's ours to determine, not theirs?
And, you know, when the Port Commission this past year, they made a decision, which was, I believe, to raise the fees by, I believe it was 10%. And then thereafter, for the next 4 years after, is use the CPI of the Anchorage area, which this past year was 1.66%. So the fees went up automatically 1.66, which you all approved. But we also remember they can also go in reverse too. If we went into a recession, we would probably see the rates go down. But even at 1.66%, that's an extremely low inflation rate. But that's where the port, I wasn't at the last meeting and I won't be at this upcoming meeting, but I want to be able to, you know, and the chairman's not here tonight, so, but that was the argument, that was their thinking. I think Councilmember Johnson, you know, who attended one of those meetings on the fee increases, because I believe 5 years ago, there was a talk of about a 30% increase over a period of years, and the council said, and everybody said no. And now we circled back last year to start discussing this. And that's where we are.
Rate increases should be commensurate with your expenses, not based on what people feel that they're getting. Like, I get what you think you're not getting any increased services, but yet it's costing us money to give you those services, and that cost has increased. And the fact that they think that they're going to increase to save money so that they can do some future port improvements doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you can't even cover the expenses that you have right now because you haven't increased your port fees.
Well, obviously, the cost of the boat ramp project was far higher than we anticipated. The anode project, you know, I think that was the first project that they came back and said, you have problems there. You know, there are other projects that are going to show up and they're going to come out of left field on you because something is going to happen. And, you know, and I think everybody, and I know the Port Commission feels the same way. They want to make sure they have the money available here to do what they need to do also, without having to come and say we didn't maybe plan right or, you know, or come in hat in hand.
That's what we're here for.
Like Joy said, it's kind of prudent to have a maintenance reserve type.
Yeah.
That's
Right, but we don't even have it for ourselves.
Well, it's our fault. That's
No,
not our-
well, it's our fault too, because we don't even have our own maintenance funds. We just had this discussion about replacing police vehicles the other day.
Yeah, so they're being proactive.
But they're doing it, they want to use our general fund to do that, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I don't see it that way.
How much does the port owe the city?
Well, it's come down significantly. They've paid off a lot of their debt to us this past year.
How much?
Nikki,
They owe $483,000.
And they were well over $1 million, I believe, at one point.
And then there was the, oh, by the way, the Wesco dock is falling apart, which we spent $1.5 million on. So,
Anyway, all right, well, I've said my piece. I indulge y'all.
We'll look at that alternative. We'll try to estimate out what we think the revenues will be through the end of the year, fiscal year. Because we've already started doing that anyway, to see if we're gonna have a surplus or not.
Okay, do we want to go to the port capital projects? On page 34, overall revenue is projected at $4,072,847. About $3.4 million of that is in grant funds and contributions. We have $995,000 from the 19 DC 008 for the Arctic Deep Draft Project. We have a $300,000 part of the match coming from NSEDC for the launch ramp repair, and $2.1 million for the EDA harbor launch ramp repair funding. $594,536 are transferred in from port operating to cover our portion of the match at $245,828, $15,000 for the port waste reception facility, and $329,708 for the cost share for DOT, and $4,000 for the Dead Man Anchor project. The expense matches the revenue at $4,072,847. Again, $995,000 for the 19 DC 008 Arctic Draft Project. $2.1 million for the EDA harbor launch ramp repair. $245,828 for our match on the EDA harbor launch ramp repair. $300,000 for NSEDC's portion of the harbor launch ramp repair, and we have $15,000 for the port waste reception facility, $329,708 for the DOT cost share, and $4,000 for the Dead Man Anchor project. And pages 35 and 36 show those same details with a total budget of $4,072,847. Are there any questions on the capital projects? Do we want to go back to the beginning of the presentation to Fund 12? Or was there?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Okay. So on page 6, we start with the F-22 school bond fund. In revenue, we're projecting $77,988 in the school bond reimbursement funds, and this is still contingent on State of Alaska funding. That breaks down into $47,861 for the 2012-2 and $30,127 for 2015-1A. We have a general fund for $206,737 to cover the school bond payments, less the reimbursements. And in expense, we have $284,725 in school bond principal and interest payments. That breaks down as $146,100 for the 2012-2, $87,750 on the 2015-1A, and $50,875 on the 2015-1B. Page 7 shows those two revenue reimbursements coming in from the state, as well as the transfer in from the general fund for the $206,736 for a total revenue picture of $284,725. And page 8 shows you the breakdown of each of those bond principal and interest payments, again for a total of $284,725. Are there any questions on the school bond fund?
For those that were not here last time, all of your school bonds are paid off by 2028. And I think one of them is paid off in 2023, and I think the next one is 2025. So that's pretty good. Unfortunately, as we talked about this the last time, the interest rates are 5%, but they're also not callable.
Okay, I think we can move on to 13.
Okay, on page 10, Special Revenue Fund, Fund 13, we're projecting revenue at $1,427,651. Have Milky interest earnings at $35. Our most recent statement from AMLIP is at 0.01%. $85,000 for E911 surcharge, $7,000 for PLA funding for the library through the Department of Education, $10,000 as a placeholder for SART reimbursements through the Department of Public Safety, $200,000 as a placeholder for NSEDC Community Benefit Share funding, $10,000 as a placeholder for IMLS funding through Nome Community for the library, $8,000 for NSEDC Community Employment Program funding. We were awarded $12,788 to spend between April 15th and December 31. We have a placeholder of $1,250 for library travel grants through the Department of Education, and $10,000 as a placeholder for the Historic Preservation Grant, $225,000 for an estimated remaining amount for CARES funding, $68,366 for an estimated amount of the remaining funds for the MOA with the State Health and Social Services, and $803,000 as the placeholder for the American Rescue Plan funds. We are starting to get some Treasury guidance, but we're hoping for more later this week. On page 11, the expense mirrors the revenue at $1,427,651. $35 is a placeholder for museum expenditures of the Milky funds. $85,000 is a placeholder for police expenses eligible for E911 funding. And I made a note here that those eligible expenses include the salaries and associated expenses of the 911 call takers for that portion of time spent taking and transferring 911 calls. There's $7,000 for PLA expenses for library purchases such as books. $10,000 as a placeholder for SART expenses. $200,000 as a placeholder for NSEDC Community Benefit Share funding. $10,000 as a placeholder for IMLS expense. $8,000 again for the NSEDC Community Employment Program. $1,250 for the library travel expenses funded through the Department of Education. $10,000 for a placeholder for Historic Preservation Grant, and $225,000 as a placeholder for CARES funding. We have funds set aside for public health, PPE, cleaning supplies, advertisements, and medical equipment for EMS, and economic support for businesses and individuals impacted by COVID-19. $68,366 as a placeholder for the remaining funds available for the MOA with the state. These are funds for salaries and benefits to meet flights at Alaska Airlines, to provide information of COVID-19 testing, vaccinations, and quarantine, utilities at the airport tent, PPE, and health equity funding for the homeless population. We're partnered with Nome Community Center and Norton Sound Health Corporation. And then $803,000 as a placeholder for the American Rescue Plan funds. And then pages 12, 13, and 14 show the details of those two slides. Are there any questions about Fund 13?
I have a question for Glenn, in that I started to get some requests, and maybe you have too, for the folks that were business affected by Iditarod not coming because of COVID. Because at one time back in January, he said, well, let's wait to get through March and see where we are with that, and maybe we'll have another restaurant, lodging, people who are directly bars, maybe, ones that are directly impacted by the Adidra as a possible phase.
We're so thrilled.
Well, I know, well, you've had some time to,
Actually, I reached out to NJUS, and what I'm probably going to come back with is a recommendation that we cover their utility bill in the month of March for storefront businesses. We have a lot of businesses that are not storefront. They operate out of their home. When they got the last year contribution from the council at $3,000, that covered some of their utility bills for 6 to 10 months. We looked at NGLS, provided me a list of businesses that are storefront, and it would be about $110,000 in credit that they could apply to the companies, those businesses. They were hospitality, they were restaurants, hotels, everything. And I'm going to ask the mayor to put it on his other hat as NJUS director. I asked the director to provide that information, and it came out to about $110,000. And it would be probably the easiest way for us to administer that money. That money also could still be used to help offset some of our increases and other stimulus, packages. But, when a lot of requests has been, okay, let's put it in those businesses' hands, but in a more indirect way. Some of the businesses could possibly see a grant up to $8,000 to $10,000, if maybe not a little bit more, but based on the size of the business and the amount of their utilities. I mean, I got this list. I'm not going out and,
well, you have sales tax numbers now between the 2 years, right?
Well, we
And
could
you
go
have-
back. We could go back and
And you have data on the electricity or utility usage.
well, we went and looked at the utility. Well, this is before we started looking at this back in February, late March. Is just a way to look at it in case it came up. The sales tax information, we could probably have through, because sales tax, actually, I'm not throwing Brian under the bus, but it goes through his office
Right.
up to Nikki. So we'll see what we have and come back with a recommendation. But, the utility credit went over fairly big with a lot of businesses because it allowed them to get through the month, some of the winter months.
It seems like I know Gerald's probably looking at not having a carte blanche thing, but we already have data that would determine whether somebody could need to use the money based on the sales tax, their sales tax reports, whether they brought in substantially less money from one year to the next.
Well, we can look at that. I mean, obviously, we can't.
As a possibility of determining.
We discuss this in large picture for you because
That's- yeah.
we can't give, say, okay, business A really hurt this year versus business B, and we don't know all the reasons. We used that approach, as you recall, for
Right.
what happened at the holidays when the city closed down the restaurants and the bars at that one particular time, and we came up with a percentage to reimburse the businesses. Now, I've talked to a couple businesses, I'm getting mixed messages. Their business is down 50% during the week still, but it's not down as bad on weekends, maybe 10%.
They can give you that information, but when we asked for some sort of program that would show how the pandemic has impacted them, the response was pretty universal that, oh, well, we can't keep those there's no way for us to figure that out. So, that was that was the counter argument for making it a needs-based thing, was that they couldn't figure that out. But if they can tell you, just off the top that, our
Well,
weekday business is down 50% and our weekend business is only down 25.
well, maybe those are businesses that could or better managed, or the owners had a better handle on what was going on. I mean, we can go look at the sales tax and look at the individual, basis, and if you want to, come up with a formula that if you were down X number, then you're eligible for this, come up with some type of sliding scale. I mean, one of the things and the restaurants and the liquor stores have done overall fairly well this year. But we know the bars,
Even during Iditarod?
I have not checked. I'm
Probably
waiting.
not
I have not
compared.
gotten the March numbers from April yet. So to look at that issue. I just know when I've looked at other months, the food stores and the liquor stores have been pretty much holding their own.
Well, we know that because more people are here and not traveling. So they're expending some of their money locally.
And they're not going into a bar to drink. They're going.
They're right. They're choosing to be social distance at home and
Well, I'm not saying social distance.
Question, has the chamber provided any feedback, input, like what their constituency has deemed necessary at this point?
Actually, the discussion is how do we advertise to make sure everybody knows we're open? And that's why they're using their website now. As you may have recalled, there was the lieutenant governor, if you read the paper, was in. I was not physically well enough to go to the meeting, though I did sit in on the other meetings where I could stay away from people. So I wasn't there for that meeting. I don't know who was there for that meeting with the lieutenant governor on how much we're down for tourism. So I don't have that information in front of me.
I'm thinking the chamber, since they're kind of have a pulse of the business community, like they haven't come up with any suggestions to the city about how we might better be able to serve our business industry. They have no suggestions.
the chamber has in the past, but basically, I think right now, everybody's waiting to see what the city is going to come back with this remaining funds. Because as I said, we'd wait for the March numbers to come in. Well, the March numbers have now come in, so I'm not saying that's how we go, but I'm just saying that it's time to start looking at it.
We'll come back with something.
Do we still have the person on staff that was contacting businesses individually? Is that person still doing that?
Well, the person, the sales tax accounting clerk, interacts with the businesses. We are trying to make sure they're informed, like, the 7% increase was going into effect because last year we didn't notify them with enough time and they got mad with us. So we went with that approach this year and we're trying to communicate that way. And we're also looking at, okay, you received money, but are you paying sales tax still?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have the answer that you may be wanting.
Doesn't sound like it. Just a thought, reaching out to the chamber and asking, have the businesses come and said, this is what our needs are, this is what our concerns are, this is where we feel like the city could help us at this point in time, instead of just taking a wild guess and saying, let's pay their utilities.
Well, that was, as you may recall, the last time we paid utilities for businesses and the residents, and I believe that totaled up somewhere 70,000.
300 and something.
It might have been $300,000. And this time we know we don't have anywhere near that. As you may recall, we had people coming in and signing a document. We haven't been doing, that. And then the question, do the businesses now? The chamber has not communicated anything to me. And I've been in plenty of meetings
where there's been a chamber representative. So, and maybe, Councilmember Johnson is correct. They're looking for us to do something.
Or maybe, like Jennifer said, maybe it's time to reach out and see, Brett, and come back with some suggestions.
I mean, I'd hate to force feed something that isn't necessarily, because it
Right.
sounds like you had a thought, like, is that what they need? Like, do they need indirect funds for something else? Because
Well, just,
utilities aren't their concern at this point, like operating expenses or whatever, maybe. Time for barges to come in. Maybe they need the funds to get their next shipment, because they don't have that revenue.
well, you got to know, remember, there are limitations on the care funds.
Right.
It's not for them to buy stock to put on their shelves. You've already given them grant money based on the amount of revenue they took in. I think, remember, it was 2019. You've given them a utility credit. You have also given a safety monies. And then on top of that, the 13 or 14 businesses that were impacted by the decision to close down from Thanksgiving to January 4th. So there have been 4 of those programs, plus the individual programs for them as residents, which was a utility credit and a $500 per adult and $100 for a child.
I just know during Iditarod time, a lot of vendors aren't necessarily business storefronts either. Like the St. Joe's craft fair, there's a lot of small individual business owners sitting in there selling their crafts, and they spend the entire year making them for that particular event. And then you've got like all the nonprofits who are like doing the Girl Scout pancake breakfast. And I know like Nome Chamber, or not Chamber, is it the Rotary, I think, does another one, and all these different businesses that rely on that body of people to help fund scholarships and travel expenses and things like that for their small club organizations. And it sounds like we're only looking at helping business fronts, and I'm not sure if that's a fair thing to do, especially for Iditarod activities, knowing how they typically are. They're very community oriented. They're not necessarily all business oriented.
But you also gave to each crafter twice $300. So all the crafters, so they could make whatever they want.
Some of their pieces are over $300. I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I spent $300 on a pair of slippers that I wear. So that's probably not much for them. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
We gave out $800,000. The city gave out at your direction for the individual people in the city that were impacted. I've talked, or Cheryl, I would say, has talked to a number of crafters who are frankly retired, and they do this to supplement their income. But they couldn't come out if they had wanted to right now. Now, we could have a craft fair now. We're starting to open up Old St. Joe's as it is for community events, and we're going to go June 1st. Anybody wants a Christmas party? I mean, not Christmas. I know it.
Just kidding.
Anybody who wants to have a birthday party and all that, because the community is opening back up and safely. And I'm not so sure we won't have a crafts fair, but I wish I had an answer for everybody.
Well, but typically, like if we had a craft fair today, they're not going to have the same type of audience that they would if they had people from out of town. And that's the difference between having a craft fair during Iditarod and having a craft fair not during Iditarod. There's a whole different group of people looking to purchase the items that they get. And so their craft fair today isn't going to garner the same type of wages that a craft fair during Iditarod would.
But I have to say, we did not have one crafter that could meet the guidelines that you had for businesses. In other words, I believe it was a fifth start of 50,000 or 10,000. We didn't have one crafter come through. And, a lot of folks this year have gotten other stimulus checks through the federal government too, that we have to take into consideration that help offset some of the problems that some people have had. And I don't have the answer, but I'm just trying to come up with something, do we help the businesses? Do we turn around and go back through all the effort? Because the project for the individual checks for the residents just about broke us physically here and mentally because it was so huge. We're just looking at something that, is quick. I'll be the first one to say that. And injects right into the businesses. May not go into their pockets, but it's going to save them from taking out of their pocket to pay NJUS.
Just don't want to exclude people that we should be helping at this point. So I understand what you're saying. I get it. If people have suggestions out there that might be watching or YouTubing later,
Please send
let
them
Mr.
forward.
Steckman know what you want.
Please.
I guess the craft fair is always so crowded that you can't walk through there if you want to. But I'm not sure how many of those are Nome residents and how many of those are folks that come out, from the surrounding area.
I just know it's a busy time.
Right.
And there's many wares to be had and people have a plethora of wares to be trying to sell that we're still sitting on because we didn't have our event then. I think we'll be doing a disservice to a portion of our Iditarod Iditarod vendors and businesses. So I just don't want us to get too narrow in focus if we're trying to help our community.
What's that?
Okay,
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly. Okay, next.
on page 16, we have Fund 14, the Capital Projects Fund. In the revenue, $30,000 is estimated reimbursement from Nome Public Schools for the 18-plex engineering. And $378,000 is a transfer in from the general fund to cover capital purchases. In the expense, we have $30,000 estimated for the 18-plex engineering, $63,000 for the purchase of the 2021 Ford Expedition. This purchase started in F21 via R210404 and will transfer to F22 based on the barge schedule. We have $65,000 for the purchase of a new or used hose truck from the fire department. And I know they're actively working on looking for one now, so this could come out if they find one. And then we have $250,000 for the 5-year lease program estimate for heavy equipment. We moved this from the F22 General Fund Public Works Roads budget, and it is still for the dozer, loader, and dump truck. And then page 17 just outlines those same details. Are there any questions on Fund 14?
And just so everybody also may have forgotten, the hose truck was actually in this year's budget, the 2021. So if we are able to secure one by June, that'll come out of the budget.
So on the equipment, do we have any further information
We're
from
gonna
what we've had in the
We're
past?
going to have information when DPW comes up next. Versus buying, I was given numbers, we're going back and looking at our numbers to determine, is it in the city's interest to purchase this equipment or not versus using the private sector. Now, and I wasn't prepared to get into this, but the only one that I know definitely we probably need, we should go with is at least the dump truck.
Because the dump truck, what's wrong with the dump truck?
I know,
The
right?
truck bed the whole truck is wearing out. Some of our, that's why I would prefer to,
Oh, we have that coming up in a
Yes.
future time.
right,
Okay, we won't belabor over that.
Okay, well, while we're on this one here, Jennifer brought up again the thing about the police cars that we talked about last time. And in one of these recent, or I guess in the proposal here, they were stealing the mayor's truck or car, which is fine because it wasn't used anyway, and sharing with City Hall makes much more sense. But a good vehicle was somehow got its hands into the police department that sent us back a couple of old, well-worn vehicles, one of which the city manager was driving and has been on the sideline for a period of time. Now the engine is out of it.
We are taking it off and putting it out of its misery.
So we need to put a replacement vehicle on the list for that.
Well,
I'm advocating for it.
That was Adam, by the way, not Jennifer.
Okay.
I was paying.
the way we've been purchasing equipment does not make sense to me, but I wasn't here, so I will preface that. You do have a $1.3 million reserve or capital fund for police vehicles. Though you have not put anything into it for a while, except I think, Nikki, there was $150,000 put into it, but most of the increase of the original amount, which was $1 million, was because of interest that you.
Yeah. Interest and the 150,000 from the health insurance holiday.
Okay, so instead of the health insurance fund going back into the general fund, a decision was made to move it over into the vehicle replacement fund. Now, in this vehicle replacement fund, you also have $500,000 for your self-insurance. And that is based on the fact that most of your buildings are insured at $100,000 deductible. So if you had 5 buildings destroyed in a year, you could meet the deductible requirements for that. But it doesn't reflect the insurance that we pay to AML. That's on top of that. So remember, we're paying every year for all of our buildings. Historically, you have not been putting money into this 500,000 plus 300,000. You have $800,000 in that equipment replacement fund. Now, typically, a community would be taking all of their vehicles and putting them literally in a bank. And they would be budgeting each year, on average, how much it would cost to replace that vehicle at the end of its lifetime. We've not been doing that. So, but what I'm saying is you have $800,000 there. I'm not recommending that money be spent at this point, but there's $800,000 there. Just like you have your landfill, monofill closure money. You have 3.3 or 3.8 million in there. According to the what I've seen, it would cost you about 2.4, 2.5 to close. I mean, it's just where you want to put your money. I mean, you could move that over into a vehicle replacement fund, but all of these funds, which were in CDs typically, you're getting no interest. We have to maintain our liquidity in Wells Fargo so we don't get a bill from them for the use of their services. And I believe, what's that number, Nikki?
The cost of the services runs about $2,000 a month, and the amount of funds we needed to keep in Wells Fargo in April was 8.9 million.
So, and that's also forcing you to keep more money in reserve without pulling down on your surplus or on your various funds. And some of those funds, Nikki, how much are still tied up in CDs? I know I just caught you off guard. Yeah.
So we have the 1.3 million in the self-insurance is in CDs, 1.2 million in PERS, although 248,000 of that is pending to be reinvested, and 3.3 million in the landfill CDs. Also, some of that's an AMLIP with 500,000 waiting for reinvestment, and 1.8 million in general fund reserve CDs.
So, but we're having to maintain a checking account of roughly $9 million. Now, we get a 0.25% interest rate, just so you know.
I have a question about that whole conversation. So I hear Mr. Hanlon saying that we need a new vehicle for the city. Didn't sound like you were advocating much for that, so I'm trying to figure out where we're at here with that whole conversation.
Well, Glenn's not gonna ask for himself, but I am.
Well, you need to, if that's what you need, like,
And the reason being,
When there are guests that are in town that I haul around as well, I get to borrow it. So we're sharing one.
as opposed to just a luxury vehicle for the city manager to drive around.
Correct.
It's basically so we can show people in a vehicle that's not been utilized as
it has been
Correct.
from the
it
police
has
department.
been.
And do you have a suggestion at what type of vehicle?
No, I just,
Based on the number of people that you have gotten to take around, does it need to be like a 2-seater, a 4-seater, like, you know,
it
like,
needs to be, an expedition would be an excellent vehicle for that.
that's kind of what I'm looking for, like a suggestion of what type of vehicle would be beneficial to doing the type of work that you need it to do.
I would not I would never recommend that we buy any vehicle that's not a 4-wheel drive.
That makes a whole lot.
Because we have a van that we use, that we can't use in the winter months because it's not 4-wheel drive.
So how do we go about asking our finance director to put that on the agenda or in the
Tell
budget?
the city manager you want to see it in there for the next reading.
All right, we'll see if we can get one. We will not probably be able to get it delivered this. I don't think we're going to be able to get it. We'll see if we can.
Sorry.
You know, the problem is I'm hearing that noise and I'm hearing you guys talk and it's a little distracting,
Well,
yes.
if it wasn't 800 degrees in here, we could close the door or the windows.
Well, if we had a new heating and ventilation system.
Just for anybody who's not in the room, it's hot in here.
It was so hot in here on Saturday when I came in the lobby. I opened up the doors here to bring the heat in just to get the hot lobby down. So, no, we've got to go and ask because we got to go off a government contract.
Right.
Everything that we look at buying is off a government contract. So,
I don't know about the rest of you, but I would like to see the city invest in a vehicle that is more suitable to the city manager and mayor taking care of
it's going to
young kids
be,
that come into town.
it's going to be a plain Jane one.
That's, I mean, but just something that is more a presentable vehicle, exactly. It doesn't have to be fancy, but presentable would be.
Then rather than just continuing to have these vehicles around, we should put them up for sale and get rid of them.
Yes.
Let somebody else have enjoy it.
And you mentioned this, vehicles typically go in a bank, so all the vehicles that the city owns, did I understand that correctly?
That's not how we've been doing it.
I understand that's not how we've been doing it, but would it be more beneficial for the city of Nome to do that, in your opinion, as a city manager, for how many years? And the type of city that we have here, and the type of vehicles that we have here, and the type of things that we need here?
Well, ideally, because of the conditions up here, it would probably be beneficial for us to retire any vehicle after I'm talking about a rig, not a big DPW vehicle like a Doge.
Right.
But I'm probably going to say we probably should retire a vehicle every 70 years. That should be their maximum age. Now, and I say that's just one of the guidelines. Occasionally you do get a vehicle that just has problems from the day you get it to the
Sure.
day, but usually I would use a 6 to 7 year, turnaround.
And so how would we as a council go about changing the current vehicle thing? Can that be a discussion that we have at some point? I get it, it's not appropriate.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna-
Discussion, but
We're not gonna have it for this budget.
something in the future so that
Yeah.
we're not having these conversations like, oh, we should have saved for that, like, because I feel bad asking for one because I don't think it's in our budget, but like a better way to replace our vehicles would be, I would feel would be appropriate for council to address. I don't know about the rest, but that's what I think.
Well, we are putting the police, just so you know, on a 1 year, one the second year. They are on that cycle right now. So we'll buy next year 2 new vehicles for them. This year you bought one, but you also are purchasing a side-by-side. And I don't look at replacing that after that for a while. But I think for patrol vehicles, you're looking at 2 new ones 1 year, 1 next year, and then just keeping that cycle.
So next year will be a 2-year.
Yes.
So vehicle replacement thing is similar to their employment replacement.
Shh.
Sorry, we need to change that status.
Yes.
Now, I think we are trying to change that status by making, the expectations a little bit more that the younger employees have versus older employees have in terms of how they want to live.
Okay, if nothing further on that, we'll move on to Fund 15, our last one in this group. And then maybe we'll have a couple of minutes in between before the 7 o'clock.
So on page 19, we have Fund 15, the School Renovation and Repair Fund. In revenue, we're looking at $1,283,760, and these are reimbursements from Nome Public Schools for their roof repair and replacement project. In expense, $58,215 in estimated engineering, and $1,225,545 in estimated construction. The plan is for them to rebid the project in the fall, and then this budget reflects about 70% of the full construction cost. And then page 20 just provides you those same details in the spreadsheet format.
I have a question about this one.
Go ahead.
This projected roof replacement cost, is that based on the new price of materials or based on the price of materials that we got last year when things weren't hog wild crazy?
This is based on their project agreement that was signed in 2018.
And they're supposed to hold,
With
I
the
believe
state.
they were supposed to hold the prices on that. Weren't they, Nikki?
I would have to check in with Mr. Blees.
Because I remember we were having this discussion.
Okay.
But who knows, based on what we could be seeing an increase. We'll have an answer.
Okay, thank you. I was just, so it's based on a 2018 projected cost.
I guess I'm just wondering
Actual
why
contract.
70% of the budget, where's the other 30% coming from?
So I reached out to Jamie Burgess to ask her what she thought they might get through by June 30, 2022. And she suggested the 70%. The next part would flow into F23.
Oh, okay, so that's how much of the project they can complete, potentially, is 70%.
Potentially.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor, I know that there is a break, but we do, and we didn't get it into the packet, but I do have Amy, Dr. Chan, Phillips Chan on the phone, and Marguerite, who's here, to save them from having to come back. I know you don't have their budgets in front of you. You got it in a previous packet.
Just give an overview. of
Just
their-
give an overview.
their,
Well, can I go
priorities.
first?
Can you come up a little closer, please?
So, probably the biggest thing in my department is that, as Nikki said, I have a public library assistance grant through the state library. It's normally about $7,000. It depends on how much the governor gives, how many libraries apply. It also comes with a huge amount of goodwill from Alaska State Library. In normal years, under this grant, I have to do some sort of simple things, but I also have to be open 40 hours a week for 48 out of the weeks. And this year, they gave a blanket exemption to all of the libraries that received this grant due to COVID. And we didn't have to be open any hours, and that ends June 30th. So I was in conversation with the state about what their expectations were as of July 1st. And as of July 1st, they are wanting me to be open 20 hours scheduled. And it can be whatever 20 hours we want, but they would really like to see us open to foot traffic. So that is sort of a big change. And I knew that question would certainly be asked when my budget came forward. So I just found out this information on Thursday, and I spoke with the city manager and the finance director. So I don't know if anyone had any questions about that, but that will be what our goal is. If there is a community surge, they have said that we can close and reopen if it feels unsafe to the city to be open at any particular time. I think my facility, part of my facility is that people sit there long periods of time. Initially, we were concerned about our elders, and now I think, don't want to get into political discussions, but people of the older ages are now able to make that choice if they choose it. People of the younger ages are not yet. Again, that's just a tool in the toolbox. So I expect that if everything goes well in the community, we will open July 1st with 20 scheduled hours and see how that goes. Right now, we have spent a lot of time the last year. We have hands-free Purell dispensers. We have hands-free soap. We have hands-free flush toilets. We have done a lot of work. We have PPE. We have things that we simply didn't have in the beginning. In the last year, we did the best we could. We passed out 1,000 craft kits to children and done the best we could while having a closed facility. I have written for other departments almost $300,000 worth of grants so that even with a closed facility, I could do what I could for other departments in addition to what we've done. So I felt that was an important thing for you to know, that we will be opening July 1st unless people have any discomfort with that. But if we choose not to, we will lose the $8,000. But they said that we are, we have always been in good standing, and some communities can lose this grant and then they choose not to give it to them again. If this community decided they didn't want us to open July 1st, they would allow us to apply next year. But
the other thing is there is no increase in staffing. So the staffing remains the same. Marguerite has just secured a grant to also pay for a seasonal employee to be in the, when we do open. So I think, and I also, Marguerite was involved, and Janet, because one staff member decided not to work this year. Marguerite does have curbside delivery, and she has prepared over 1,000 craft kits. So while the building has been closed, there has been a lot of interaction that the community has been able to have with the library. And Marguerite does deserve a lot of credit for securing some of these grants, including $170,000 that you approved with the state of Alaska which is helping to offset any costs we have at the airport. So it's not a demand on the city taxpayers. And it even pays me, but it doesn't pay me, but it pays the city for my time when I go out on weekends and work. So it's a win-win situation that Marbury has done. And we are going to be slowly, opening up because we have all sorts of people coming into that facility. For people that come to use the free Wi-Fi that we have in the building, and Marguerite's arranged to get tablets so that they're easier to clean.
I do have a grant in which we purchased iPads so that people could social distance at the library, because currently our wired computers do not allow 6 feet of distance. So we will reduce the number of wired computers and offer for checkout within the library, because we have those benches all along the side. So we do have that. I also recently got a small grant, again from the state library. So the $8,000 becomes more important. They offer other grants. And this one is a laptop and some additional equipment so that we can offer virtual programming for those families that want to come into the library. I have spoken with some other rural librarians, and they said that there are some people who still want to have the curbside. There's some people who still want to have the virtual. So I think that we'll have to do a hybrid program so that people feel safe and comfortable and can still take advantage of the library services.
A question on the 20 hours that you have to stay open. You said something about that if there's a community surge that you have to close, you're afraid of losing that grant if that had to happen.
No, they actually offered that. I said, well, what under what conditions do I need to continue? And they said I could really choose which hours that was going to work. There are certain other things. We still need to get the plexiglass up around our circulation desk. I was just really curious, and really they just want us to open 20 hours starting July 1st, and I have to show proof. So I asked what type of proof. They gave me some different options, and I believe we'll do a advertisement. We'll put it around at the radio stations, and but that advertisement would certainly be a public record. So that's going to be what, unless anybody else has any objections, that's going to be what I'm going to work for between now and July 1st.
Great, thank you. Any questions of Marguerite?
All right, thank you for all the grant work.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Amy's on the phone, and I know that we have about 5 or 6 minutes, and I know you need a break. Amy has no increases in her personnel. The goal is for her to be open by July 1st, but we have to hire an aide to be able to assist in managing the front desk. So that ad is now out. Amy, I know that you have a couple projects in your budget, and if, I hate to ask you to sum up something in 2 minutes, but if you could talk a little bit about some of the programming or projects that you want to do, which are a little above your normal budget.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Glenn, and everybody for the invitation to attend tonight's work session. So for our FY21 budget, since we did not have our 2 other full-time staff members, a museum aide and an education and public programs coordinator, which was a savings of about $80,000, we were able to shift some of that money, around $6,000 to $8,000, to hire to work with 2 oral historians, R.B. Smith and Carol Gales, and they helped us launch this COVID-19 oral history project. So we're now kind of in phase 2 of the oral history project. So this is going to extend into FY22. And so far, we've worked with 30 community members here in Nome, documenting their personal experiences of the pandemic. Those interviews have been recorded and transcribed, and they're now being edited into kind of these compelling short stories. And those will be featured in a special exhibit and a publication here, hopefully in December. The exhibit will open at the museum. Along with the Oral History Project, we've launched a COVID-19 Artist Initiative. So I've been working with artists across the region. We've worked with 12 artists, basically to commission pieces that reflect or respond to the pandemic. And then I've been interviewing the artists as well to kind of share their stories, not only about their artwork, but their kind of personal experiences of COVID-19. So together, those two components, the oral histories and the artwork, will make up this special exhibit that we're going to be launching here at the end of the year. So this will be in the FY22 budget, as well as the publication. So this is really a collaborative project. So we've had over 42 community members who've been working with us, which has been great, and we're forefronting their histories, their stories and voices at the both of these kind of outcomes, these deliverables, right? The exhibit and the publication. So when you're looking at the FY22 proposed budget for the museum, you'll see some of those kind of expenses reflected in the other professional contract services line item, as well as the exhibits and slash artifacts. So we've reduced some other line items, such as our computer networks, I'm looking what else, our inventory archive, and push those off to FY23 to accommodate kind of these big projects, right, that are coming up this year. So we've done all this great work with the community members, and now we're looking at how do we get it back? How do we get it back out into the community? How do we share it for future generations? So those are some of the expenses that you'll see there that are different from normal years. As Glenn said, we're advertising for a museum aide. It's just been me for the past year. We've been really fortunate to, like I said, work with a couple of oral historians and community members. But now as we're looking to reopen again here at the beginning of July, we need to bring staffing back on board, right? So we're going to be starting with a museum aide, and then probably later this year into FY22 opening up for an education and public programs coordinator. And that position is really vital to connecting with the community and the schools as we begin to kind of open up the space, right, and invite our community members back in to really kind of utilize the access or the resources here. So that's kind of my 2-minute spiel. Maybe it's a 4-minute spiel. If anybody has any questions or thoughts about the museum, happy to visit, or just consider it of your time as well. I know you need a break. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Marguerite, for being here this evening. We'll pick out your pages again, and if we do have any other questions, we'll route those through Glenn. Thanks again, and thanks for all both of you too during this pandemic and all the work you've done on the public relations side for us. Much appreciate all that effort as well. All right, anybody want to stand up for 30 seconds? Okay, 2 minutes, all right.
We apologize to anybody. We have the temperature down as low as it goes, and we're still hot.
Informational, easy to read. My bad for not passing that on to you, ladies. Appreciate that, Nikki, and wonderful as usual.
Just want to know. They real long-legged. I was surprised. Oh, any mammal can be rabid, but lynxes are.
Because I have Ava's dog there.
Oh.
Very much love shooting.
How big a dog?
It's like this. It's
Oh,
like a
bite size, yeah.
bear hunting dog.
Oh.
Ah,
No, I think lynxes are.
they're
They
gorgeous
don't.
animals. I just never saw one in a while.
They don't have a lot of endurance, so they kind of jump. If they miss, they don't.
See that? What kind of day was it?
Adapter.
I ordered your books. I'll bring you email tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, we're really
Oh,
We've heard. I've heard.
that's gonna make it any. My kid moved over here, so you can turn back to Slack. I'm getting this over again. I gotta do this. So maybe stopping in more often. Yeah, I've been walking on that road and I thought I saw some tracks, but I wasn't 100% sure because it's on the, I was listening to the new glacier. Yeah, yeah. Walking through there, and pretty regular now, and I thought I saw.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's the right thing to do. There's some families that still.
They got the,
there's been a lot of people that
it goes in
don't
front or in back. Like the dog has it.
These are
Beyond, right, track beyond, beyond the codes.
I really think we need to have work session. I mean,
But I'll send you an email.
because doing this from 4:30 until.
178 pages, Brian. And it was Mother's Day this weekend, so guess who didn't look at her packet yesterday?
What?
I got it tonight.
No.
Thank God. I was like, don't do this to me.
No, we're still kind of like edge, you know, fresh and open. Edges. Eyesight, when you're trapping them, you hang a timing and off the second reading. Grade.
They all have to go hand in hand. I think at the same time, all of them at once.
Yeah.
I like that one on Thursday. That wasn't. Yeah. That was way nicer.
Also, just like if we have a bunch of stuff on the agenda that may or may, like, might need a lot of discussion or controversial, we can have a work session. Just, yeah.
We're work session now. I thought we had one Monday. Oh, no, we're backlogged. We've got at least two that haven't been scheduled. Oh. Heck, with climate change, you need to put air conditioning in. Yeah.
I would say make a note not to wear sweatshirts to meetings anymore. I'm usually freezing, so that's why I wear them all the time. But I am regretting my life choices right this minute.
Winter burning out the summit. Yeah, right. There's vegetarian, veggie, and pepperoni. And a cupcake. We have a party the other night.
I get caffeine.
I don't know, there may be.
That's with my tomatoes. Just trying to figure out if it's you on the back. I was like, I don't usually swear to you.
Anybody else want something to do before we to the side?
I'm okay with that.
Exactly.
Just cross out your PO box and all the ones you don't want. Right, yeah.
Right, we're just a little bit late getting going here after a work session on budget prior, starting at 5:30. And the time is now 7:10. Call the regular meeting of Nome Common Council for Monday, May 10th, 2021 to order. Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes, here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Martinson is excused, Councilmember Reeder,
Here?
Councilmember Topcock,
No,
Youth Representative Okalisic.
she has family obligations. She texts me.
Okay, we have quorum.
Thank you. Moving on then to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Approve the agenda for May 10th, 2020.
Second.
Councilmember Reeder, Councilmember Brown. Discussion?
Well, I move to amend today's agenda to postpone Resolution 210501, a resolution issuing a moonlight loans permit to Northwest Gold Diggers to the following meeting, 2 weeks from now.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded to remove item D from new business, resolution 210501, and reschedule it to the next meeting of the council. Roll call, please. Oh, pardon me.
Can I ask
Yes.
like a clarifying question as to why we move it to the next meeting?
Yeah, so I had some folks reach out to me, and this also caught me by surprise. I'll admit I did not read the packet till this morning. But I just wanted to dig into this a little bit more and understand it better, because it is potentially impacting our city's water source. And I did have citizens come forward with concerns to me, but it was also a surprise to them. So I would just like some additional time to review everything and make an informed decision. And also give our public opportunity to provide additional comments if they so choose.
I too was contacted by a community member requesting the same, so I'm just gonna add that to her comment. I don't know if anybody else was, but I was as well.
Any further comments? Roll call, please, on the amendment, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Reeder,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and now's probably a good time then to talk about the next meeting. There was a little bit of confusion on my part relative to Memorial Day, thinking that it was the 31st, or excuse me, that it was the Monday of our meeting. So I had Bryant move things to Tuesday, which included some publication notices that are now in the paper. So we'll need to move the meeting that actually was on, what day, Brian? The 24th. The 24th to the 25th.
I made the same mistake, scheduling a brief vacation with my son who's flying up here to see Dad. And I was not coming back until the 25th, but I'll be here for the meeting.
Regarding, were we talking about agenda meeting?
No, it was simply to be put off to the next meeting so that we could say what the date was of the meeting, to note that we would be meeting on Tuesday instead of Monday.
Which Tuesday?
The
25th.
25th.
And today is the 10th.
Today is the 10th.
I don't know the answer to this, but being that I know that we got a permit in front of us, is it possible, and it sounds like there's a lot of interest from the public to learn more about this project, is it possible to have a work session and maybe a special meeting rather than wait 2 weeks to go to the next regular meeting? We could look at doing that, so that we can learn more about it and respond sooner than 2 weeks from now, possibly.
Or you want, so I'm gonna have to throw in there if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. Are you gonna want Mr. Belize to be here too?
I think it would be helpful whether he's either here in public or whether he's on Zoom. because there is a process in our code for, or I don't know if it's an ordinance, but in policy where there was an adoption of a matrix to rank various things within the permitting and different things are given different numerical scores to come up with a final answer. So it would be good to have that information available and to have Mr. Please here to explain that.
So he does this matrix that you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So is there objection then to scheduling this? When would be a good day?
Well, we've got a motion on the table right now to approve the agenda, but.
Yeah, but just so we know whether the motion, okay, that's fine.
Well, I mean,
Oh, we approved.
it was, the motion to amend pushed it to the next meeting.
That's correct. I stand
So if
by.
we schedule a special meeting, it would be right then.
Is there urgency to it needing to be, I mean,
Yeah, jobs and people. I've worked close. I've worked with John Belize on the permit and spent time with him and met him in Anchorage with him, and we went through all of his concerns that he had, and he went through and said that it was all that we met everything that he was concerned about. Pushing this back puts us back 2 more weeks starting to mine. And we buy a lot of jobs and for the community and put a lot of money back into the community. So it would be nice to a little quicker. I mean, we go 2 weeks, and then if there's something, I mean, if the concerns out a little bit now and figure out what the concerns are and address them now.
Mr. Clerk, can you confirm that the motion was to the next meeting and not the next regular meeting? I don't recall how you stated it.
I don't
I said
recall.
to the next meeting is what
I
she
don't
said.
recall the word regular.
Okay.
My notes say the 25th because that's the next meeting. I'd have to
Okay.
listen to the
I mean, I think that was the intention.
Yep.
But under discussion, under grammatical.
Right. Okay, so we have an amendment to the agenda. Is there any amendment, any further amendments or an amendment to the amendment?
Call the question.
So, well, we should clarify what the intent, well, we already voted on.
I was gonna say, didn't we vote on it
Yes.
already?
We already said, yes, we're moving it to the next meeting. We've already
So-
said that, we just haven't approved the agenda for this meeting. Is that where we're at? That's my understanding.
We've got public comment section coming up in a few minutes where I'm assuming we'll have some comments related to it. And if the commenters agree, we can have a little back and forth, can't we?
Sure. Although we should
Get
have
some
Mrs.
questions
Louise
answered.
available.
Well, you also just wanted time to dig into it. I don't know.
Right.
Comments tonight.
Right. So the project developer is here.
Okay, so we've amended the agenda to remove item D. Are there any other changes to the agenda? If not, a roll call for the adoption of the agenda as amended.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion as amended carries.
Thank you. Next item is approval of minutes from the June 22nd, 2020 council regular meeting. Is there a motion, please, to adopt these minutes?
Move to approve the Nome Common Council regular meeting for June 22nd, 2020.
Second.
I just say that I would really like somebody to go back through and correct a lot of the grammatical errors in here before I go nuts. There were so many and I just stopped. I just couldn't because it was, if you read it, you'll see right away where it's okay. But if somebody could go fix them before they actually go into a public document, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
I will go over them all.
All right. Was there a second?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reader, Councilmember Brown, any discussion?
Under discussion, we can give the city clerk just changes in grammatical things. which-
Yes, please.
There's a word for that I use all the time and I can't think of it now, so. Roll call please on the adoption of the approval of the minutes, please.
Councilmember Reader,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to communications, then the first item is from the state of Alaska, Northern Region Director, Ryan Anderson, relative to Nome Bering Street rehabilitation and Nome Airport paving. Do we have any comments on this before I comment?
Just thanking them for giving us a heads up. Nice to have that.
Okay, I guess my comment relates to the Nome Airport paving. I don't know if anybody noticed specifically the general expected traffic impacts that during this summer, our main runway will be closed for 60 days. The crosswind runway will be half width. So I guess that means it's still full length. Is that, you know what that, do you have any insight into that, Ken? Okay.
I haven't read that part of the packet.
Okay.
John, as I was reading it, I thought the runways must be wide enough that they can allow a plane to just use half of it. And it's going to be quite a project reviewing this, and it's going to be disruptions, no doubt, to air traffic coming into the city.
Yeah, I guess I had just not read it closely that said half width, thinking that they were actually only having one section of the runway, so that maybe we were down to the little dash 8 planes running, which would be a major impact on the community. But
I will find out.
okay. Next item from Nome Preschool Association, there was a lost tax bill. Is there a motion to forgive the penalties and interest on the 2021 tax bill for Nome Preschool?
I would make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Topcon.
And I'm just gonna make a note for the council's awareness that Mackenzie is my daughter, and I will abstain from the vote if you feel that's appropriate.
I don't think under the deal where it says a substantial financial interest that meets that bar. You may
Didn't think
vote.
so either, but I just wanted to throw that out there for public clarity.
Thank you for making it known.
I'll declare also that I'm a bookkeeper for Nome Preschool. But whether this gets forgiven or not, my fees have been the same for 20 years, probably won't change.
I'm going to say you can vote as well.
But I do have a further comment under discussion.
Okay.
And maybe a comment for this, or a question for the city clerk that this came up. Because as a bookkeeper, I look back and I didn't see that this tax was necessarily assessed in prior years. Had they put in for exemption, do you know?
No.
So I wonder why, I don't understand why it came up. And I know they're just only asking for removal of conflict of interest. But can a nonprofit ask for removal of a tax that's been assessed? If they chose to do that?
In prior years, audited years, that have been reported to the state.
Would they have qualified for an exemption? Had they applied?
With personal property tax, to my knowledge, the city of Nome does not grant any exemptions.
So this is personal property tax?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Roll call, please, on the motion to forgive the interest and penalty for Nome preschool.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcott. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next communication is from the finance director with regard to NSEDC community benefit funds. Essentially, in order for us to get new funds, we have to expend the prior year's funds and close those out. So her note of action necessary is in the 4th and 5th paragraphs. Started within February.
Essentially, you would have to give us direction to use the $81,456.97 to be used in place of, but also a little bit of the $100,000 that you allocated this year. So we have to spend all that money that's been set aside. Then you can turn around and give the Nome ice rink folks 81,000 of the 100,000 from that you have in this year's funds from NSEDC. They will not allow us to carry those funds over anymore for the Nome sportsmen.
Okay, I move to reallocate the $100,000 of NSEDC funds to the youth programs.
No, you want to allocate 81,450.
Since we have to do this first before we can do that first, so
Yeah.
am I doing it backwards?
Yeah, you have to allocate the money to the programs that you've already approved.
Okay, I thought that's what
This
this, okay, her, just so you know what Nikki suggested, it says to provide the funds to these recipients, the council needs to reallocate the prior year funds, which was $100,000. Is that correct, Nikki?
No, that's the 81,000.
Prior year funds are the $81,456.97.
So I need to reallocate the 81,000
Correct.
first?
Yep.
Okay, so move
To the youth programs.
81,456.97 to youth programs
From the hockey rink.
from the hockey rink.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'm trying to do the right thing. Bryant, are we on a roll? Are we getting the right thing for you? Make sure we're doing it right. Okay, thank you.
There's not discussion. A roll call, please, on the reallocation.
So what youth programs are we talking about?
The youth programs that you approved this year, you allocated you had $200,000 from the NSEDC fund.
Oh, so we're just switching.
Yeah,
Switching
them around.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's no new money, old money,
No.
whatever. It's just
It's an
out
account.
of this pot goes.
I was really trying to figure it out on my own, but
Okay.
I'm glad that somebody helped me figure this out because I couldn't come up with it.
But what happened, can you explain what happens again once we do this?
Well, when you do this, you're also going to have to allocate again 81,400 whatever it is from the current $200,000 NSCDC grant to us, and then there's roughly $18,543.03 out of that 100,000 that's going to still have to be used for the $100,000 overall that you promised the youth organizations this year.
So essentially, if I'm reading it, it is that the expectation is that 81,000 that was included in this youth programs thing will get spent down before the hockey rink funding. So that so we're spending that first, and then not taking the money away from the hockey rink, but just moving the sequence of what we're putting into each CBS report.
I understand.
Okay. Okay, roll call please on that motion.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the second motion now needs to then be to allocate 81,456.97 from youth programs to the hockey rink, and this utilizing the next increment of funding.
Our current $200,000 allocation of NSCDC funds.
So I move to move the 81,456.97 to fund the hockey rink to the 2020 CBS budget
From the youth.
from the youth programs.
And a second, Councilmember Reader, Councilmember Topcock. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Motion carries.
Thank you. The next is our budget calendar.
Can I ask a quick question about that hockey rink? Are we looking at doing any work with that? Are we gonna keep having to roll these funds forward? Are we like looking to spend it? Like, I don't want to create any more hardship for CBS funding because I don't want to lose that funding.
Mr. Blees, Mr. Leeper are meeting with representatives from the hockey league, or the ice skating folks, skating rink folks, I should say. Every 2 or 3 weeks, they are looking at a chosen site that is, I forget on which side of the rec center, and relocating it there and the cost of relocating it. So they are working, we're not working, one of the things, I just want to remind everybody, one of the things that was the city was being accused of was not interacting with that board of directors, and we are. So and maybe we'll have an update when Mr. Blees may be up here to talk about another issue, or by Zoom.
Great, thanks. Okay, so the next is our 2022 budget calendar. We held a work session today. The Board of Equalization this week was canceled, or last week was canceled. All appeals were resolved. And this next one says, if needed.
Well, we do need it.
Okay. I was thinking as much as well. So next work session will be on May 17th, 5:30 on the budget again.
And the May 24 is May 25 for the next regular council.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Moving on then to planning and zoning. We have some catch-up minutes here. Unless there's objection, we'll take them all as one motion. June 2nd, 2024. What's that?
Aren't those just for information? Okay.
Oh.
I was like, oh, wait, what? I'm about to catch
Okay.
up reading.
Yep. Thank you, sorry. All right, moving on then to citizens' comments. Are there members of the audience that would like to address the council? Please come to the podium, state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Charles Lean, resident of Nome for 7 years. So, I have concerns about the mining permit, particularly that portion of the permit that would allow mining above the limestone aquifer, and much less so about that area below or down on the flat. The reason is that that is our reservoir. That the city of Nome's reservoir is that marble slab that goes through the mountain. And the mountain is ever so slightly tilted. And if you haven't noticed, I'll point it out to you, that if you look at the southwestern aspect of most of the hills along the coastal plain here, there's a spring. And you can see that Newton subdivision, you can see that at Moonlight Springs, you can see that on Banner Ridge, and so forth. And so the water tends to run to the south with the westerly bent to it. It's primarily south tilting, but a little bit west. Another thing you need to think of in that slab, it comes through the mountain, it's bounded on the top by a layer of different bedrock, micaceous schist, and below, same. And the water works its way through the limestone and marble. In the process, it makes it a little bit hard, but it makes it, we have the nicest water in Western Alaska. It's a little bit effervescent because the water is resident for 3 years and it fizzes when it comes out of your tap. It's really high quality water. You could bottle it and sell it in New York. That limestone slab is super saturated on the south edge, and that's where it's leaking out into a satellite field area. And you can look up on the mountainside and see little stands of cottonwood and tall willows. They're the trees that have to have their feet wet, have to have thawed ground year round. So that means that there's water constantly weeping in those locations year round. But if you go further up, it's not the case. So when you expose the top of the limestone slab, it's open to accept water or anything else. And that's the risk. The risk is not down at the bottom in the old gravels, the tailings, or near the tailings down at the bottom, because there's constant water pressure pushing everything away, pushing it to the south. And it runs through that tailing pile under the highway and pops out on the south side there. Some of it springs up right there in Wester Bench subdivision and those dredge ponds along there. Some of it goes further and pops up, goes through our solid waste landfill and comes up on the other side in a great big spring this time of year. If you go stand there, you can see it burbling out of the ground. That water, once it passes through all that tailings and stuff, is laced with arsenic. It's poisonous to people. It's poisonous to fish. The reason Anvil Creek isn't poisonous to fish is because so much of the Moonlight Springs water is going down there and it dilutes it. The solution, the pollution is dilution. So I'm not very concerned about the permit of the lower area. I am pretty concerned about the exposing the top of the limestone aquifer. I think that would be a mistake. It's already been made there at Cooper Gulch. There's a big chunk of it showing if you just drive up there at that switchback and look. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. And the closer you get to the Moonlight Springs, the more likely you are to see any pollution that would get in there, make it into our water system. So I understand this is being put off. I get back on the 25th, I hope, from traveling. I may or may not be at the next meeting. But that I wrote a note. I just wanted to clarify that I'm concerned about exposing the top of the aquifer. I'm really not too concerned about exposing the lower part. And I really think it would be a terrible idea to put tailings on top of the limestone as a remediation project. That's a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Danielle Slingsby speaking as myself. I'm not as knowledgeable as Charlie, but I have talked to a bunch of people and read some comments out in the public just with concerns about mining near our public water source. I share those concerns, not because I have an extensive amount of knowledge about mining, but because I utilize the area for subsistence. I pick berries there myself, and I love our water. And I have my son here, and I want to make sure that all of our youth and people are healthy. Our elders in specific utilize that area a lot for subsistence, I've noticed, with greens and berries, because they can't get out much further. It's easy access for them. I do appreciate Northwest Gold and what they've done so far with maintaining the road to have access to Amble. I think that was great. At first I was a little grumpy about it because it was bad, but I don't think this is an attack specifically on their project, but I'd also like to see some environmental studies done to really know what the impact is, and if we're risking our water source at this point, whether the risk is moderate, medium, or high, do we have a backup plan, and what is it? So if the water is contaminated, I know I read the documents and I saw they have mediation as far as oil booms and things like that to clean up, but when crap hits the fan, there's only so much you can do sometimes. And if it is in the water source and then we're dealing with that, what's our next option? And do we have one? So I'd like to see that. So I appreciate the council postponing just to get more information. And I think that that's a smart move. And I think, obviously if they're working with police, that's a step to get more information on making sure it's a good and solid move for our community. I do appreciate the fact that it's economy. But I really, really strongly am against anything that would sacrifice our water specifically. I mean, it's what we all need and rely on. And also the subsistence in that area is highly valued by our local people. So that's all.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
My name is Jeff Collins. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I was looking at where the proposed mining spot is at, and going over some older reports, I've noticed that the engineer's report from a while ago had mentioned that that below the springs was a safe place to mine, but above was the issue. To speak to the fragility of that, some of the older council members may remember that there was a reindeer herd that had parked itself above the springs at one point, and the chlorine, because of the amount of E. coli in the water, had increased. The E. coli had increased within the water, and the more chlorine had to be added to the water system. So it's already a fragile system. I guess another question I have for the council is that area, there are signs in there that are designating the area for a protected watershed. I just wonder what the definition of that protected watershed is and what it pertains to.
Protected watershed is, there are maps and hatch marks on an actual map.
Correct.
So there are areas within there that are no mine, and there are no disturbance.
Right.
And there are other areas that are disturbance with safeguards.
Okay. And those are my questions. But seeing over the where earlier engineers' reports had suggested not mining, that the state had actually diverted. My understanding, the state had diverted Glacier Creek Road to prevent traffic, overuse of traffic within that area. So I just think those are things to consider as we move forward.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Noctiborn, and my comment is also for R210501. And so I just found out about this on Friday from talking to 4 or 5 other local residents. And so I kind of started to dig into the report, but I'm not very heavy into the mining jargon. However, I did notice that there were a lot of high-risk problems in the report. And so those could lead to things such as contaminated drinking water, disruption of the growth of aqua plants and animals, as well as potential acid effects on the terrain. And so that would definitely affect subsistence gathering as well as our local water source. And so for me, I saw that there was money to like fix these problems. However, that does not create an immediate solution. And so for me, the idea of compensation cannot really change or reverse damage done to the health of residents of Nome. And so as a pregnant and soon-to-be mom, I personally do not want to put my child at risk. And I'm sure that other parents would probably feel the same way, as that damage from potential arsenic or other runoff cannot be changed in that moment. And so I personally oppose the mining, but I know that this will probably be pushed further in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I did not catch your name.
Oh, Mary Noctiborn.
Thank you. Are there others that would like to address the council?
I'm Roxanne Thurman. I'm just concerned about this because this is.
Sorry, did you state your name?
Roxanne Thurman.
Thank you.
I'm concerned about it because this is our only drinking water. It's everything for Nome, and if you ruin it, Nome won't be a town. So I'm really against it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there others?
John Pomeranke. So through the process of the permit, I've been working with John Belize, and John has reached out to the man that actually did the watershed protective area, and they believe that there will be no impact or threat to the wells of Nome. Man, I'm a longtime resident of Nome. I love my community, been here for a long time. And I mean, that's the last thing I would want to do is to jeopardize our well or our drinking water, because it is important. I mean, I drink the water. I've worked with John on addressing it all and any issues of and concerns that he's had, and I think mining done responsibly and correctly, that we could it would greatly benefit the community, and I know it doesn't look like a whole lot out there right now, but by the end of the summer, we're going to start doing all of our reclamation. Might be the greenest part of Nome. So we take pride in our reclamation and turning things back to looking and being better than what we found them in. But it takes time to do that too. So. And I do appreciate everybody's concerns and look forward to working with the city on getting this permit.
Thank you. Brothers.
I have like no voice right now. I've been teaching all day with it as well, but my name is Rosa Wright. I wasn't planning to say anything, but I just want to I appreciate you addressing and looking into that, because I used to live right by the basketball court that's over there. I was covered up. I don't know if you guys know much about it. It was covered up because there was arsenic put in the ground over there. And I remember as a kid having to get my hair cut to get tested because we were playing in the dirt near there, and there was arsenic in the ground, and my siblings, one of my brothers got some pretty bad arsenic poisoning from the dirt over there. And so I have, there's a lot of reservations and concerns that go along with mining, especially in areas that we're around, that kids play in, that people are around. I don't know a lot about it, but I just hope that as we move forward, that everyone's watching very carefully, and that you take the time to do it, not to rush it because of jobs or whatever, but taking the time to really look at it and not just rush it because of timelines and because of jobs on the line, but take the health seriously, because when you try to rush something, sometimes you don't know that impact that you have. So I just have concerns with that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your comments, and now we're moving on to unfinished business. We have ordinance 210402 that was rescheduled for second reading, public hearing, and final passage. Mr. Clerk.
0210402, an ordinance amending chapter 2.15 and chapter 7.15 and chapter 15.10 to elect city council members, school board members, and utility board members at large.
Thank you. The council will stand in recess to take public testimony on this ordinance. Are there members of the public that wish to address this?
Good evening. This topic's probably a little bit more obscure than our drinking water, but I still think it's pretty important. Good evening. My name is Scott Henderson, and I try to vote in every local election that I can. My comments tonight are my own personal opinions, and I don't represent any organization or affiliation. I testified 2 weeks ago regarding the proposed ordinance that changes our current laws for elections. To summarize my concerns, first, changing election laws is a very serious and thoughtful endeavor, and we should have a full understanding of why we're changing the laws and what we hope to accomplish with that change. The reasons expressed by several council members is that we hope to encourage more candidates to run for office. The way this ordinance is supposed to do that is to make elections more anonymous by throwing everyone's name in the same hat so contestants don't have to run against each other. But there's really no assurance that participation will actually improve with this ordinance. I feel a major reason candidates don't run for public office is probably the same reason that many voters don't vote. I believe it's because they don't believe their candidacy or vote really matters that much, because they don't feel connected to the process. As a community, we should be looking for ways to make voters and candidates more connected to each other instead of less. Due to the limited campaigning required by local contenders for our current at-large elections process, as a voter, I sometimes find it challenging to know where candidates stand on important issues. Unfortunately, it seems like I often don't find out until after the election. I believe making campaigns and elections more anonymous will not solve this problem, it will make it worse. Instead of trying to make it easier for candidates to run for office by essentially hiding in a group, we really should be looking for ways to make it easier for voters to connect with candidates and forging a stronger link between them. Second, if we're going to change the way voters elect their leaders, the voters should be the ones that make that decision, not common council members by a simple majority vote. I suspect the vote was delayed at the last meeting because there may not have been sufficient votes to pass the ordinance. If that's the case and the council is split on this issue, then it demonstrates an even stronger reason why we should leave this issue to the voters. The state of Alaska recently changed its election laws, but the state legislature didn't mandate that change. It left it up to the voters to make the decision. Changes proposed here tonight are not insignificant and could affect re-election chances for every utility, school board, and common council member. Due to this potential conflict of interest, or at least the appearance of one, this is really a good issue to have the voters decide instead of the city council. Finally, if we're still interested in changing our election laws, then we should also consider other alternatives, such as district voting, which may actually draw voters and candidates closer together and improve participation in our local political process. I think this would be an amazing opportunity and a civics lesson for the students in our community to engage in. Let's get our young people involved in learning about the different types of electoral systems to help us decide what future elections in Nome should look like. Put several options on the ballot and let the voters decide. Thanks for listening. there others who would like to testify on this ordinance? Being known the time is 7:55, call the council back into regular session. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 210402?
I'll move to adopt ordinance number 0210402.
Second.
Councilmember Duncan, Councilmember Brown. The floor is open for council discussion.
Well, I very much appreciate the comments and the feedback on this ordinance. I apologize, I did not follow up with you like I promised. It's hard when summer's coming. So I guess I'll just, not to rehash reasons why this came up, but thinking about this as an Indigenous woman with a different set of values around community, around leadership, around governance, really. My intent here in thinking about this was to make it feel less adversarial. But I do take the point about maybe our citizens should be the ones making that change. And when I work with tribes in my capacity at COERIC, we think, we have these discussions about what should go to the membership, citizenship, and what can be done by the council. Usually my rule of thumb is if you're limiting or taking away rights, absolutely, it should go to the citizens to decide. Other things which, may be neutral or expanding rights, I generally say, if the council feels comfortable moving forward on it, then they should. In this situation, the intent is to make things more expansive. It's intended to give people the feeling that they can have more participation without feeling like they have to choose who they're going to run against. And I'll admit, when Jennifer was running, I didn't want to run against Jennifer. I was like, she has a long history in this community. I don't know that I would have a good chance. And that was a factor when I decided to run, was who was in what seat. And the fact that Stan Anderson was not running for re-election made a big difference in that. I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to step on toes. I don't like to create conflict. I don't like to create controversy. So my thought was, maybe, and I won't speak for all Indigenous people because that's not my place. That's not what I should be doing. But for me individually, this felt less intimidating. And I think a big part of why we don't see citizen participation sometimes is it feels very adversarial. When I work with my tribal governments, we talk about the same system, about whether to run for specific seats or to have it at large. I encourage them to think about both and the pros and cons to each. Because oftentimes we see, sometimes somebody will run for a seat and then retract. And then some people don't want to vote for a certain seat because they don't like who's running for it. And so to me, in my mind, this, based on, the last 3 years of working with 19 different tribes, all 20 tribes really, I've been an election judge for many of them, seeing how their different systems work, comparing it to the cities and other tribes and states and nations. I feel like we need to do something different. Whether this is it, I don't know. But I want to do something. Because what we're doing right now doesn't seem to be working. We're not getting the citizen participation that I wish we had. And that's a big reason why I ran, was I wanted to see people like me sitting in these seats and standing at that podium and to have a voice in a government that impacts us, which historically did not always make space for Indigenous people. If you look at 1915, there was a law passed stating that someone like me would have to get 5 white sponsors to say that I had given up all my cultural ties, that I had broken things off with my with my people, with my family, in order to be a citizen. That's, you know, it's, and not to dwell on the history or to just, you know, say, you know, be like, oh, poor me, my poor family members, my poor ancestors. But there are laws like that that have disenfranchised people, certain groups of people. And so everything that I do, I try to think of ways to pull people in. How do we? So this is my stab at it, and it's just one piece of a bigger thought process on how to get voter engagement, to get candidates, to get, you know, just civic participation. You know, it's being in the schools, working with our youth is absolutely vital. That's why I love teaching tribal government in the high schools and talking about and having a youth rep. That's me trying to pipeline our youth in, which Zoe's not here today because she had other stuff going on. But I really hope that someday she's a council member. Same with Molly Kennick. You know, I hope that those youth, that creates a space for them to feel like this is theirs, that they have ownership of it, and they have a voice that matters, because it does. District voting, I will say, I disagree on that one. I think we're too small of a community. I like the idea, the intent behind it. I love that. Trying to bring subgroups of our community together to engage in issues. I just worry that some districts, some years, might not have anybody at all, and then what do we do? Are we appointing people? Then that just kind of feels like we're calling the shots and telling districts who should be their leadership. And I don't know that I like that or like going down that road. So this, to me, felt like the better option, but I could be wrong. I often am. I'm young. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. Don't know what I'm saying half the time, but here we are. So those are my thoughts. And if, you know, if folks think this should go to our citizens to vote on, we should come up with different options. I'm all for that. You know, that's not a bad idea. I think, you know, we should create a system that works for our citizens. And they should have a say in shaping it. And they elect us to have these conversations, to get them rolling. And I feel like I'm rambling and talking a lot, and so I will be quiet now. But that's my spiel.
Councilmember Brown. Yeah, so I really like this ordinance, the concept of at-large seats, to where we're not running against an individual. I mean, I've personally benefited from the current system because I'm positive that there's been years that people decided not to run for council against me because they knew that I was vice president of Bering Straits Native Corporation. You know, an incumbent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I don't like that that's what happens. I like the system that I've seen the Native corporations use. I've been an election judge in numerous village corporation elections. I've observed Bering Straits Native Corp elections, assisted in those, to where basically you've got 5 seats open. You vote your shares as you see fit. You're not pitting, okay, we got these 3 people running against Gail Schubert for this seat. Well, actually, nobody would run against Gail. That'd be a perfect example of what I'm talking about. But it really expands the number of people that become interested, in my opinion, or at least it takes away the number of people that are disinclined to run because of the current system would be lessened by this ordinance. I don't believe this went to the voters when we changed it from the system that we're proposing to the current system back in the late 70s or thereabouts. I believe that was a council decision. So I'm positive that it's appropriate for the council to change it back to the way it was before. I think that in a time when we have politicians across the country proposing laws to make things more difficult to vote and that it just makes sense for us to go the other direction, to make things a little easier to participate in the government. So that's where I stand. I've kind of been thinking about this, and I'm glad that Sigvana brought it forward, because it's something I've been pondering for a good 10, 12 years myself. We just never had the support of the other council members until hopefully now. That's my 5 cents.
Thank you. Others?
I did some research. When I was thinking about it, I went back and watched the YouTube video to get your points again, so that was helpful. And what I've come across is the NAACP website has an at-large voting frequently asked questions page. And it indicates that they are actually doing away with a lot of that because of the fact that they find that when you have a minority in your community, that typically the minority voice is not heard. And so they suggest not using that voting system because of the fact that the minority votes obviously will not count. You can't get enough of the majority to vote to overrun something that might be, like if it was a black white or a native white or whatever type of issue, male, female, whatever that may be, whatever the minority is, will typically come out on the losing end just because they don't have the number of votes that they need. So they actually have said that they have says our at-large voting is becoming rarer and rarer, in part due to the advocacy of this organization and other civil rights organizations because they're so discriminatory in nature. And so I found it interesting that you were advocating for it, knowing what your intent is. So just going to throw that out there, food for thought. It seemed like we're going to be doing the opposite of what our intention is. I'm not sure what the fix is to that. I get what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree wholeheartedly because at the time when I ran, it was a lot of chatter on Facebook in different groups saying we want more representation by women voters, and so that's what kind of prompted me to try. And so, and I was sad to hear that you didn't run against me because you didn't feel like you could win. I mean that, but I get it. Like I understand, because there's a popularity contest that kind of goes along with your name. Being the Braying Straits board president probably carried a lot of weight. And somebody contacted me, referenced this after they heard the KNOM report, which I was really sad to hear that that's the first time some people heard of it because there was actually a first reading about it. So I'm just going to say it was out there prior to KNOM doing their report. So I wish people would get a little more involved that way. That would be great. So that's not the first time they hear it is when KNOM actually does a report on it, or the Nugget probably threw an ad out there for us as well. Kind of part of the problem. People aren't paying attention. They're just kind of like, oh, I trust him, I trust him, I trust her. Somebody on this board you trust. That's why we're here. And they typically say that if you're doing a good job, nobody's going to come to your meetings. That's typically what happens. Like after COVID was kind of over, this place was a ghost town. There was nobody in these seats, not one person. There was no public comments. It was like, where'd everybody go? You know, I thought we were working through this pandemic together. And then all of a sudden I felt like we were like, there you go. Like whatever you guys are doing is great, even though I know that's not true because I still see Nome chatter and all that kind of stuff. I typically disagree with using that format to forward your concerns about the way city government is run because it's not a very effective way to help the community get through something. You actually need these interactions coming to the council and telling people, you know, like I want some more information about this water project, for instance, is a great way to do it. I was only contacted by one person about it, but I see way more people in the audience that are wanting to discuss that issue. So I'm glad you came. I'm glad you decided to step up and get involved in the local government, but I don't know that this ordinance is going to get the desired outcome that your intention is at this point. And something to the voters, maybe somebody's got a better idea. Maybe the student government can work on that as part of a process. Granted, that's at the end of the school year, but maybe next year's teacher, since we're losing Aaron, will hopefully maybe pick this up for us. I don't know that this is an appropriate system for what we're trying to do at this point. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, do you have an opportunity? Doug Johnson, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with the goals, but I don't think this is a way to get there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mark
I'll
Johnson.
keep mine short and sweet too.
Yeah.
I was a proponent of this as well early on when I first got elected because my background is similar to Gerald's, working with for-profit Native corporation elections, and I thought that was a good system that maybe would encourage more people to run here because at the time I ran, most people sitting around here had been here for several years and weren't being challenged, I guess, or people weren't running against them. And but with that said, I'm also more inclined to not change the rules as a council, but to throw it out to the voters to let them decide whether we want to change the way that we elect council members and school board members and utility board members, because it's also affecting those other boards as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Everybody's had an opportunity. Is there a second? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just, I find that very interesting if you could share that about the NAACP.
I will forward you that.
Yeah, I suspect it's a bigger issue in large communities where, and then if you layer on like districting and things of that nature, I could absolutely see that being the case. I think we have to consider Nome is probably not fitting in what they were.
Yeah, there was definitely some disparities in what they were talking about. They were talking like Vermont and places like that. I will grant you that, but
yeah,
I just thought it was interesting that that was their take on that type of voting.
I think we could have another work session or something and talk about different systems to put it to the voters. I just don't want to keep doing what we're doing because something's not working. So this was my attempt. Maybe it fails. That's okay. At least the conversation was started as long as it doesn't die. Because I want the community to be involved. I don't feel like we can be good leaders if we don't have more public participation. So if we could think about ways in which to do that, beyond just voting too, I think there's the point taken about the candidates and having discussions in more forums. I know the Nugget, I wrote a whole thing up for the Nugget in anticipation of running, and that was really interesting to see what everybody had to say as their platforms. Maybe we do more, but I also want to balance that. I don't want to intimidate people and push them away from running just because there's this another layer of and I mean, if you're going to run for council, be serious about it, and there's going to be expectations on you, so acknowledging that. But how do we make it more accessible? I'd love to hear ideas.
Thank you. Any parting?
I'd just like to say basically the same thing. That I think that the areas that the NAACP report was focusing on were much larger communities, and
That was just one of the sources. I actually had a couple. Like I said, it was more than one place that I found that same information from. So I'll send you those are the links that I.
I can see where if you've got a community, an entire city that's like 30% minority and 70% non-minority, and you make all of the seats at large with no districting, that your majority population is going to win every seat because that's the way it's structured. I think in a community where it's more 50-50, like here, that's not the case. I really think that the focus on this ordinance is to make it easier for people to run for council. Okay, not and again, in that the study, my suspicion is that the alternative that they would propose is similar to Scott's districting idea. So where you've got 30% minority, which unfortunately in today's society, but it's the way it is because of institutional racism that goes back for hundreds of years and whatnot, but they're forced into or focused in a small area in a district. So that district would end up with 30% of the seats basically, and the 70% end up with the remainder end up with the other 70%. But again, in Nome, it's not that way. We don't have districts. We don't have a very the minority majority issue as much because it's more of a 50-50 or 55-45, whatever. So I don't know. I'd really like to see this go, and we try it because what we're doing isn't working. So anyway.
Thank you. Any other follow-up, second round? If not, I think we're ready for the question then. Question is on the adoption of ordinance 210402, not amended.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
No.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
No.
Councilmember Reeder.
No.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, thank you. The next item we have, then moving on to new business, is first reading of ordinance 210501.
O 210501, an ordinance authorizing the sale of surplus real property owned by the city of Nome by public sealed bid.
Thank you. Discussion?
Move to approve the first reading of ordinance 210501.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to pass this ordinance on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage. Yeah, discussion.
Is there a typo on the on A under the first property that's listed? It says assessed value 155,000, minimum bid 35,000. Where is that?
This was the property. I believe it's a red house that's up on stilts down on Belmont. It was put up for bid the previous time, but the building is basically not downable. So didn't garner any bids, and I put it as an handout. The set value.
Oh, you said we have buyers for both of those down there.
Not at that price.
So assessed value is
With the building.
Yeah.
The building wasn't salvageable.
I guess just being we just went through an assessment, why didn't that get knocked down to zero?
nobody questioned.
It wasn't a full year. It wasn't a full reassessment. and there were no permits pulled on it, no red flags.
And it's owned by the city, right?
Yes.
So there wouldn't be any,
There's no checks.
yeah,
Disputable.
wouldn't be any incentive to challenge it.
Okay, that answers that. That's- Clears it up. Better understanding.
Mr. Mayor. So as our ordinance reads that the city council can decide as the minimum bid is assessed value of what the city council decides, if it sets it by ordinance. I took the initiative in placing it at the land, but you can.
That was my next question. The minimum bid on here is the current assessed value of the land, of the lot.
Correct.
Okay, if there's not further discussion, roll call please on passing this along. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Elsa Bronson's property, the home, is listed on this. All the way down, go down to section B, two-story structure. We listed the value, a minimum of $1,000. To try to get someone to move it, there's going to be quite expensive to move the house, from what we've been informed.
So the house, it's just the house for sale, not the land that goes with it. Just get it out of here and you can have it for $1,000.
That's right.
A minimum bid of $1,000. Okay.
Just want to make sure you all saw that.
It's a good deal if we give them $1,000 to take it.
We'd be coming out ahead.
Roll call please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcott. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is 210502 ordinance. Mr. Clerk.
0210502, an ordinance of the Nome Common Council, Nome, Alaska, providing for a temporary reduction of sales tax for the months of July and August of 2021.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass this on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage?
To pass ordinance 210502 on to second reading and final passage.
Second.
Councilmember Reader, Councilmember Mark Johnson, discussion. Please, Mr. Manager.
Through the American Rescue Plan Act, it appears that if we ineligible use for those funds, which we are looking at about $803,000, changes that reduce the next net tax revenue must not be offset with American Rescue Plan funds. So I've got a meeting, and Nikki and I'll be at Wednesday. While I'm not saying you shouldn't go ahead and pass this for first reading, it could impact your usage of the American Rescue Plan Act funds.
So in other words, this is not a done deal by any means.
Right. And just so you know, today we got a 151-page document on how to spend these funds. The other restriction, which doesn't apply to us, extraordinary payments into a pension fund. There have been a lot of communities where we managed our own direct pension funds, and there were always shortages because of the investment returns, so that doesn't affect us.
Okay, ready for a vote then on the passing this on to the next reading at the next meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcott.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Then we have an ordinance 210503. Mr. Clerk.
0210503, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of municipal property by lease to GCI Communication Corporation.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass this on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage?
Move to pass ordinance 210503 on to second reading and final passage.
Thank you. Councilmember Reader.
Second.
Councilmember Reader. Councilmember Brown. Any further discussion?
Can I ask why are we leasing instead of selling it, and what are they building or using it for?
GCI has historically leased this property from the city. They've been typically paying us anywhere between $4,800 and $5,500. They are planning on putting a tower there, which they have applied for the permits. This is where their big dishes are over by the harbor. Yeah, where your big,
The water.
yeah, the big satellite dishes. The term normally on places like this are an initial 5-year term and 4 5-year additional terms. A couple people have come to me in the past couple days after we got the packet out, asking if we could go back and look at negotiating the term a little bit different, which would be a 10-year term with 2 5-year optionals. Either side could terminate the 5 years optionals. But if you were in the lower 48, typically you would have anywhere between 5 years or 6 5-year renewals for sites like this, which allows communication systems to be set up.
So they're typically leased out, not sold to
Yeah, they're typically not sold.
Okay, I was wondering why we were doing it that way. And what type of tower is it? You say a communications tower, but what type of communication?
Well, it's
I know there's concerns about cell towers and stuff like that, so that's why I'm asking that question.
I don't have the, they are looking at improving cell tower communication out there. They cannot interfere, just so you know, whatever the bandwidths are being used, somebody can't come in and all of a sudden disturb the current bandwidths that are out there, so their tower couldn't override other communication out there. They are also looking at, some changes in how cable service may be delivered up here.
And this is the current, their current installation is what we're
Right.
talking about.
Right. It's not expanding.
Near the power plant.
Yeah, it's
So
not
those
expanding
big
the
dishes that
footprint.
are already there. So this is like a renewal of the lease that's been going.
Their current lease?
Yeah, and.
It doesn't say that here, so
No,
I
it
did
doesn't.
not
It
realize
doesn't.
that, so, okay.
It is a renewal of a lease that had been in place for,
I think 20 years at
yeah,
least.
quite a while.
So is there something new being built, or it's just what's already there is gonna just?
Well, they're going to be making improvements so they can get better communication up here with cell tower and with cable TV delivery. Because right now, your cable delivery is through satellite.
Right.
It's not like we're connected down to Anchorage into their trunk line down there. So it should result in better delivery of services by GCI with their improvements.
A few years ago, there was a amendment to this that increased the footprint. If they don't, if they decide to give it up, then the utility would like back this portion of lot 7 that was leased to GCI.
That's part of that belongs to the utility company.
Well, we procured it. It all belongs to the city, but it was something, and it will eventually, in my mind, be some port activity.
This is another reason to lease instead of selling.
So we can use it back if we need it.
Yeah, just lease it.
So are they trying to increase their area?
Not now.
No, they're trying to add some.
I don't know how I got that impression after reading all this. I apologize for that.
They're going to build something in front of the trailer.
Okay.
They're likely going to put some tower in front of that trailer.
So I'm not mistaken. There is something new being added.
Yes.
I was like, thought I had really misread this whole thing.
But the terminology that is used up in this region, which is, we are literally just, turning, authorizing disposal of municipal property. We are not. That's just language that's used up in this area. Because Brian and I were talking about that. Normally we would just say lease, but up here they call it disposal.
Okay.
But you're not disposing of the land.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And just another point with the lease is that Glenn jacked up the rent on them.
And a 3% CPI each year.
All right, if there's nothing further, a roll call please on passing this on to second reading.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item E, resolution 210502. Mr. Clerk.
R210502, a resolution in support of Coeric Incorporated's effort to develop a feasibility study for a regional recycling center that would serve residents and visitors of the Bering Strait.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 210502?
Move to adopt resolution number R210502.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Topcock, Councilmember Reader. Mr. Manager,
I believe Anama Shannon is here, and she is got a presentation if you would hear it.
Oh, okay. All right, Mr. Manager.
We have met, Anama and I discussed this. One of the challenges in recycling is where do we take it? We'd like to see eventually the possibility of shipping it out of Nome. And how do we pay for that? That's all part of this discussion. And what will, I'm not trying to take anything away from what she's going to present, but we have discussed this. We want to figure out a way to extend the life of our landfills. And that's what part of this is about.
The clerk tries to figure out the technical difficulties. Sell us on your project.
Yeah, okay. I just had a few slides to show you guys, but my name is Anama Shannon. I am the Environmental Program Director at Coeric, and I've been there for 11 years. I wanted to talk to you guys just mainly to make you aware of a project that we've engaged with for many years here in Nome. People have said, oh, that's great, you guys do the e-waste event, but how come you're not taking plastic? And how come you're not taking cardboard? And why aren't you doing more? And so, after several years of hearing that and trying to understand, okay, what more can we do? What I've realized is that we are kind of up against what we've got going for us. And right now, we don't have a facility to work in. That means we don't have room for a baler. I don't have any electricity. I don't have a concrete floor. And so we just simply cannot take certain products. And so actually, Brian, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll just continue on with this. So a little bit back in 2007, Coeric was asked by some of the tribes in the region to help out with some scrap metal. At the time, the price of metal was up, and it looked like a really good idea. On Savunga, there were like 80 old BIA tanks out on the land. Yep, old heavy equipment and everything. And so a lot of the, it's just the final resting place for everything, right? As we know here in Nome, it's the same way. And so that's why this backhaul program was even started in the first place, was to try to help out with scrap metal. But then the bottom fell out of metal, and all of a sudden nobody wanted to touch it because nobody wanted to buy the metal, and certainly to get it out of here was not feasible. So next slide. So what we ended up doing was focusing on household hazardous waste. And as you guys know, Coeric serves the 20 tribes of our region. That's the whole reason that we exist. And that is what we were hearing from our communities that they really needed help with. If we weren't going to help with getting the big scrap metal pieces out, could we help with getting the hazardous stuff out? And so our focus has been on mercury bulbs, electronic waste, which has a lot of heavy metals and contaminants in it, household and lead acid batteries, and we are taking scrap metal from our communities. Next. And the thing that motivates me every day in thinking about getting these hazardous materials out of our village is that everything that goes to the dump or to the landfill has the possibility of being burned, because every single landfill in this region, including Nome, burns trash. Every single one. We don't have a single bale fill that doesn't also incorporate burning. And, inevitably, if you haven't traveled out to the villages, you may not know, but inevitably somebody goes up every day and throws some oil on there and lights it up and just, does a slow burn of whatever trash is there. And the idea is to reduce the mass of trash, right, to extend the life of the landfill. But really what's going on is that you're taking all those hazardous materials and you're just putting them up into the air. And the slower a pile of trash burns, the more dioxins are created. And dioxins obviously cause cancer. So really we're just contaminating our land and water more, and humans. We're getting exposed to that. So this is what motivates me to continue to take the household hazardous materials out. Next. The city of Nome has been, doing a form of this recycling for a long, long time. I think Joy is on the phone, and she had a program before I came along 11 years ago. And you guys hopefully all recognize the Connex van over there with the recycle sign on there. That's the city of Nome's recycle van. And we put some shovels in there, and we take, COERC and the city work together to manage this, but the city takes aluminum cans, paper, glass. You guys have a great wood separation, metal separation, bicycle separation, and white goods separation out at the landfill. And that's pretty great, because a lot of the other hubs don't even have anything like that. So it's great what we have. Again, we get asked, why are we not doing more? How come we're not doing a better job? And I hear it all the time. And kind of tired of hearing about it, so I want to do something about it. And so what I'd really like to do, and what we've gone ahead and done, is to get some funding to hire a contractor to put together a feasibility study for us. We just want to know, is it even a feasible project? Are the people of Nome going to support something like this? And are the people of the region going to support something like this? And what is it going to look like? How much is it going to cost us? Next. So, this is another big part of the motivation, is that all of our work is done outdoors. This picture is taken on a really nice day in June. Most of the year doesn't look like this, and we work outside in the mud and in the rain and in the snow and in the freezing cold. And it's not really that fun. And we don't have a building to do this kind of work with, which I think is really good work and a really important work. And so I want to know, what kind of building can we get, and what kind of partnerships can we create in this community to make this possible? Next. So the hope is to be able to work indoors, improve worker safety, have an indoor space for a baler so that we can make more sellable items, have electricity and heat, and a safe place to store our equipment. We've got a forklift, and it sits outside all summer, and it's a fairly new forklift, but I don't have a place to put it inside, and so my windows have all gotten broken off. Kids will come up there and play with all the stuff and break it. It'd be nice to have a safe place to put our expensive stuff. And then be able to take a bigger variety of materials, which I think is what I've been hearing from people in this community for years. How come you're not taking plastics, cardboard, whatever it might be? People want to be able to recycle a bigger variety of stuff. And so I think that's also the goal. Next. So the feasibility. We received this funding to do this study, and we've been reaching out with community meetings, both in Nome and in the villages. We've put out a survey, and we've gotten at least 70 back. It might be more by now. We're trying to get the survey from both residents and businesses because we want to know, how are businesses going to participate in this kind of thing. We're putting together some advisory groups. We haven't gotten those together yet, but we hope people will be interested in joining that. And we're doing separate interviews with people, mostly businesses, to just kind of take a deeper dive into what people want to see, how they would participate, what's a reasonable cost, do people want collection or do they want just a drop-off place? We've been gathering our data over 10 years and trying to just put all that into this study. It's going to show us how much waste we produce. And I've been working with John Blees on getting all the numbers, what products we could be recycling, how materials would get to market, and what materials we could just repurpose right here. Are there things that we wouldn't have to pay to ship out that we could just redo right here? For example, in Palmer and Wasilla, there's a guy there that takes all of the Valleys and Anchorage's cardboard and paper, and he turns it into blow-in insulation. So, could we do something like that here? Why not? There's a lot of different ideas for, we don't even have a community compost. So much of our food waste is going into that landfill, and we could be diverting. That's such a simple thing to divert and have a purpose, be able to have compost for all of our gardeners here. The job creation potential, that's something I really want to know about, and that's something the study will tell us about, and what the cost to the customer is, and ultimately, if it's a feasible endeavor. So, next. And, there's, it's hard for me I'm not an artist, so I can't create what I see, but just kind of trying to figure out, what's the vision? It's a small, safe, organized indoor facility to help us serve our region and mitigate the impacts to the environment. And I just see a small building. I don't think it needs to be any big, huge recycle center that's expensive to upkeep. I'd like to see something small and organized and something that fits this community. I'd love to see a partnership with the city because I think solid waste, municipal, residential waste, in Nome is that's your guys' thing, but the villages, that's our thing at Quirk, and I think we could have a really strong partnership and work together to bring resources to something like this. And the resolution, I think this is my last slide, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the resolution that I've put before you is just simply a resolution of support. I really just wanted you to be aware of this project and that it's happening right now. It's going to be going on for the next year. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about it and had the chance to ask me any questions, and that's it.
Well, great, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Shannon?
All right.
I guess not a question, but just a couple of comments on waste. Probably doesn't. You mentioned compost, which kind of is gardening, but gardening and waste probably don't go in the same location. In that, Councilmember Brown suggested that we needed a community garden.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, we wouldn't have the garden at the same spot, but I'm just,
But the compost
kind of saying we could take a waste and repurpose it. I guess that was my point.
And then in your look-see on this and the facility and the size of building and all that that's required, I guess part of the identification of that also needs to be an identification of where it would be located.
Right, and that was a question that came up with the Planning Commission as well, as if there was a place in mind, and I don't personally have a place in mind, and that's one of the questions on the survey is where would residents want this to be? Where would businesses want to see this located? Is this something that people see as a community center that you can bring your kids to and, teach them about recycling? And maybe there's some meeting spaces in there. Maybe it's more of a community building as well as a recycling center. Or is this something that we want out of sight, out of mind, and you just see a truck going to it or not? So I'm open. I don't have a design on a certain spot yet.
I only bring that up because the current location is committed to another purpose some years down the road.
Right, across from Napa, you're saying? Yeah. And I think that's another reason, I mean, we've known that the city wants to vacate that area with those connexes right there. And so that's another reason that we need to start thinking ahead as to where are we going to relocate this to? What's the next step? And I'm definitely willing to work on that. You guys.
Great. Well, thank you. Anybody have any further questions? Appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
All right. Resolution 210502. Are we ready for the vote? Did we do a motion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The last item on the new business is Resolution 210503. Mr. Clerk.
R210503, a resolution setting the City of Nome contribution for the FY 2022 Nome School District budget.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 210503?
Move to adopt resolution 210503.
Second.
Councilmember Reader, Councilmember Topcock, discussion. Straightforward. This is setting the City of Nome's contribution to the school district budget under Alaska law. It's based on a mill rate, the mandatory contribution, and the city then has determined, or the school district has requested, and by this ordinance, the city will be committing additional funding for a total contribution of $3 million.
And this is the same amount that was last year as well.
Correct. If no further comments on this, roll call please on its adoption.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reader.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on then to utility manager report, Mr. Morton.
Good evening. Ken Morton on behalf of NJU. So the question of the airport there, reached out to Yulee Hall, who reached out to Neil Strandberg. Indicate that the intent is for the 737s to not be impacted by the half-width construction. Alaska Airlines is on board and still plans to run 737s throughout the season. However, the ILS approach system will be out of service at times, so during periods of adverse weather, there might be some more additional missed flights. But the weather here is always great in summer, so it won't be a problem.
Thanks for following up on that.
Shifting on to other things. We've had a fair amount of turnover at the utility over the last handful of years, and we're low on people that have CDLs. We've been challenged to have CDL road testers come up ever since ever since the state quit providing that testing service a couple of years back. We did have some success reaching out to Northern Industrial Training to come up in the latter part of June to do road tests for our folks. We've reached out to some of the other community groups here to let them know about this opportunity. And I'm hopeful that this will be good for us and good for Nome. Expectation is that people that are interested in doing this are going to get their written test out of the way first. This is just the driving test. So if anybody has an interest, they should reach out. We're also starting recruitment again for a journeyman lineman or an apprentice lineman, depending on who expresses interest. So if you know anybody that would be a good fit, we would love to we'll toss in an application. On the water sewer front, Norton Sound Health Corporation's Office of Environmental Health is now credentialed to take some of the more common types of water testing that we do for the potable water system, the E. coli and the total coliform. And we have been sending these samples out to Anchorage a couple times a month for a long, long time. We're going to be shifting that to doing that locally. That should improve operations and save some money. On Bering Street, we're trying to get the last of everything that needs to come in on the barge, which is scheduled to leave Anchorage here this week. And this time next month, we will be under construction. Anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
My report is in your packet, but a couple of things have come up since then. First of all, the spring cleanup is scheduled for June 1st through June 5th. We will also be doing the U-Haul, We-Haul from June 1st to June 4th, which is Tuesday through Friday. We will also be having the contest and the Lions Club bus to support us excuse me, at cooking hot dogs and collecting bags and winning possible bicycles. So we we will also be opening the monofill during the week for hauling out there from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. So when people are picking stuff up, instead of trying to go find a city truck, they can just take it out. That was very popular last year that we turned out. Still a little, small, a little skinnier, but the event is still going to go happen, and we are hoping to have. Last year, as you may recall, we didn't have the hot dogs and all that, so this will be kind of nice for the kids and community support. But there'll be an ad and there'll be PSAs on that. Pfizer announced today, and the FDA announced today that children down to the age of 12 will be able to be vaccinated, so that's a major step for the community. Right now, they're saying we're a little bit at 75% vaccinated, but our population is also growing now because we're seeing more and more people come in on the plane who may not have been vaccinated here and who are here for the summer months. So right now, we're averaging anywhere between 80 and slightly over 100 people a day on the flights. And we're supposed to go to 2 flights. Right now, I think the target date is still May 22nd. So that's big. And I'm also very pleased to announce the tire shredder works. We shredded 3 tires, so it is working. We will probably have to buy a conveyor belt to take them up into the receiving area for the tires because it's really not safe to the level that I would like to see anybody up there as tires are being unloaded into this big opening, and God forbid they get dragged down into the shredder. So we'll be looking at purchasing a shredder right now. The price that we're seeing is about $15,000. I'm not sure if that includes shipping. So that's been the big issues. And as I said earlier in the work session, Old St. Joe's will be opening up June 1st for people to be able to rent for parties and everything else. We hosted the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Conference, listening conference. University of Alaska at Fairbanks is having their graduation there this week, right?
Thursday.
And I know there's something else that we got planned. That's it.
Thank you. Questions of the city manager?
I just want to say I'm excited to see the dust mitigation going already because I know that's a huge concern every year for our citizens.
I
hope
feel
we
like
can maintain it.
I feel like we're kind of getting beat a little this year because It's just the weather has been drier. And so we're working on it. As I said, we've put down 16 tons of calcium chloride already. And we'll be putting them down a lot more through the summer months.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, would you roll for councilman member comments? I'm sorry, citizens' comments. I missed it. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the council again or for the first time? Nobody's running for the opportunity. So now we'll go to roll call, please, for comments.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
I have nothing.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I'd like to throw something out there for future consideration as we're looking at the budget and other things is our town really needs a facelift as far as paint and other things. And I'd like to have the city maybe encourage people to be able to paint their buildings. One reason why they haven't been able to do that is because of our costs of things here. And I'd like to maybe encourage, maybe have the city look at giving a dollar for dollar tax break against people buying paint locally and maybe hiring local contractors if they need to do so to paint their buildings for residents and for businesses, to encourage that. And also, are we going to have any more discussion on whether we're going to have a special session and work session to further discuss the Moonlight Springs application?
Well, you are bringing it up under comments, so yeah, now's
That's a good time to really discuss
Now's a
it.
good time to discuss it.
Okay.
Do you have a suggestion?
No, I just saw in the application that the permit was actually supposed to start on the 15th, which is right around the corner. I assume that was after going through Bleed and going to the DNR. I don't know what the effect of us saying yea or nay to the whole situation, what that does with the timeline of dates, or if that makes a difference, because I don't know.
Well, we do need to get, I think the date likely was built around the fact that we were meeting tonight, and that was a few days to process paperwork. But yes, our meeting on the Tuesday, the 25th, or next week we have a budget work session scheduled for Monday. And I guess is a week adequate for people to gather their research and information?
Well, it's going to be a matter of, I assume we're going to give some direction to city management as to what we want to see at the meeting. I mean, I think next Monday is a good time to do it. Special meeting just for that after the work session. I personally would like to see some additional input from John Blees. Sean mentioned that John Blees had discussed with the individual or the firm that originally did the.
He was the individual that did the study on the Moonlight Springs.
He must be
So
80 or 90 years old by now.
He said he was pretty old and not
Yeah.
working anymore, but he reached out to him and was able to
Right.
contact him.
Well, the very first study guy is not around anymore, but we had a second study done. I believe that's Don Stevens.
Yeah.
is the guy.
Right.
More than likely that he's talking about.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But, so I guess the thing is, are we gonna have all that stuff in a meeting or have that in a work session before a meeting, or does it matter?
On voting it for it, we have to have a special meeting to vote that day, right?
Right.
Right, but I guess if we don't think we're gonna have everything we need at that point, or,
Let me, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, let me give, I tried to reach Mr. Belize on another matter this afternoon. I wasn't able to get him. Let me call him tomorrow morning. And also, to see if he has any additional thoughts. I mean, I'm not getting into the middle of this. This was Mr. Belize's responsibility to come back and make a recommendation and the guidelines and to make sure if there was any mining out there that it would meet the standards to protect the water system of the city. I know these are always difficult discussions, but let me ask if Mr. Belize has any additional comments too. And if he can have them ready, if we want to shoot for the date of the 17th. That would give him a week.
Can you specifically ask him about the arsenic issue?
Yes.
And I'm sure somebody from the utilities would be able to tell us what arsenic in the water, what kind of challenges that might pose. I'm assuming it can be dealt with. I'm just not sure how.
Don't plan on using any arsenic.
Right, but it's in the leachate.
I will ask him.
Okay. And then a better map of exactly where we're talking. I know it's generally south of where the wells are located. Or south and east. East of where? Yeah.
but yeah, we could get a map and then, I guess the background to support Lee's, I guess we need to, we need to review the tool that was adopted by the council after the planning commission reviewed it a few years ago.
15 years ago, right?
Not that decision
Oh.
deal. That's something more recent, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I mean, time goes like this, so you could be right, but I think it was more recent. Okay, well, then, I'll call for a special meeting on Monday, the 17th at, I guess 7 o'clock, if we're gonna have a budget deal. And subject to then making sure Mr. Blees is available to join the meeting. Okay, Councilman Johnson.
That's another thing for next meeting, but
Okay.
after this one.
Okay.
Councilmember Rader.
You had mentioned that there were some other work sessions that we needed to address. Are they things that we should start looking at sooner rather than later? And what issues were they? I know you're racking your brain over there. I apologize for putting you on the spot again, but.
One of them was requested by Councilmember Brown, I believe. Another one was a joint work session between the Planning Commission and the Council on the International Property Maintenance Code. And while we're doing that, we haven't updated our code since 2015, which adopted the 2009 Building Code, the 2012 National Electrical Code, and a bunch of other ones. The state of Alaska has gone on and adopted newer codes, yet we still have the older codes. We would have had an ordinance on the agenda today, but the city of Nome has a number of local modifications and exemptions that became a little bit too complicated to get done last week.
So the planning commission needs more time to work on that, or they want to work with us on that?
No, they want to work with, well, they want to work with you on the International Property Maintenance Code, which
Okay.
I think has gone to a different council sometime in the past 10 years and has been voted down. And I figure we just, since we're doing the building codes, we just roll it all into one.
And you have right to modify even the property management code, so you don't have to take it. You can take portions of it and everything else. So, and I think Mr. Barron is going to need to be here because, you know, he has led the effort to look at updating our codes.
Is it something that they'd like to do sooner rather than later, or?
I was thinking sometime in June when we're done with all the budget. And I'm still
Okay.
kind of racking my head on what we've got. We've got something for you.
I'm sure you've got a record of it somewhere.
You can't remember it either? That's awesome.
I mean, it's not on the top of my head right now.
It's not the community garden, is it?
No.
Okay.
It's not the community garden.
Just checking.
Okay. And then, but we still have I don't know if the council is still interested, but prior to the pandemic, there was the plastic bag work session, there was a revenue work session, there were a number of other topics that we were looking at that got interrupted 15 months ago.
And I think I've asked numerous times about an ordinance about discharging firearms in the small boat harbor area that has been kicked down the road many times.
I believe that's
This is going on
material as well.
year 3.
Okay, it's looking like mid-June for the next work session, and we'll figure out what falls in priority order.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking of work sessions, Councilmember Topcock and myself were having a discussion about work sessions prior to meetings. We'd like to see a change to that because it makes for a really long day for all of us. And I'm sure you would all agree that we've been here very late on many occasions. And I'd just like to look at possibly moving those to 2 separate meetings. I'm not sure how they got moved into one night, but we find ourselves here for many hours, and maybe that might be a reason why nobody's running for the city council. Just saying. So anyway, I'd like to see that conversation at some point too. And lastly, I don't know if anybody saw the email that Jamie Burgess, the Nome superintendent, put out that there is broadband assistance for families who are struggling and need that broadband assistance. She's got a link on there that you can go to the request. So just making sure people hear about that, see it, and go check it out if you are in need of that assistance. That's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Topcock.
Yes, I second what Jennifer said about work session. I know Kodiak, because it's separate, I think it's a couple days ahead of their regular meeting, they have a work session, they just go over everything on the agenda, and that sounds really nice, honestly, to just sit there and have a conversation about it and not feel constrained by Robert's Rules of Order, which I really do not like personally. Also just, you know, in general, when we have a special topic, it's a lot of research and hours put in, especially over the weekend when we're coming into summer, and I'm being selfish.
I didn't look at my packet.
So I don't know if we have a work session on work session.
I think we're gonna have a work session on work sessions.
That would be great. I'd also love to see a work session on the plastic bag ban. If Zoe was here, I'm sure she would support that. So I will go ahead and also like the paint idea. Selfishly, I'm thinking about painting my house, so that would work out quite well because that's why I'm on city council. Also, not to fill us up with work sessions, but I don't want to drop the conversation on civic engagement. This election ordinance was one of my attempts to think about civic engagement. The city needs to do better. We need to do better. We're not getting the participation that we need. We're not getting the candidates that we need. I just want to see a more robust and inclusive. Like, how do we promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community? And it needs to start. Well, I think it needs to start at the city level. As an institution, we need to build those spaces to talk about how do we promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in these spaces. So I'd like to keep that conversation going. Maybe that election amendment was not the way to go. I'll say I'm disappointed, but I want to keep that conversation going. COVID, yay, exciting. We're so close to herd immunity. People just get vaccinated if you're able. I just want to go back to whatever normal is anymore. I don't know. Koya, Conference of Young Alaskans. Deadline was today at midnight. It's now extended to the 31st. So if you know somebody between ages 16 to 24 who's interested in learning more about city government, state government, tribal government, all that fun stuff, tell them to apply. I think the old application had a box to check for the mayor to endorse you. I think that's removed now. Not that we don't want the mayor's endorsement, but I think that was maybe a roadblock to getting applicants.
Oh.
Sometimes it's a little intimidating talking to your mayor. I don't know. John is a
I
scary
endorsed
guy.
the two you called me about, so.
So yeah, if anybody has questions on that, feel free to reach out. It's August 1 to 4, in-person COVID permitting. And I think that's quiet now.
Sure. Done.
I'm done.
You don't have to be.
We'll be here for a really long time.
Okay. Next then.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, so Thursday, I think 7 p.m. is the commencement exercises for Northwest Campus. There will be a very controlled in-person gathering at Old St. Joe's for the graduates only and the staff that's needed to run the program. There will be a chance after the commencement exercises to meet with the graduates outside. There's also going to be live stream of the commencement proceedings for anyone and everyone that wishes to observe. I don't have the website to click on right now, and it'd be a really long string anyway. So I believe it's on the Northwest Campus Facebook page. It's probably on numerous other Facebook pages, such as Nome and all of those, the typical ones. There was also an ad in the paper, the Nome Nugget, on Thursday last week that has the link. Obviously, you can't click on it in the paper, but you can copy it. So that's the commencement exercises. As far as the election changes, kind of got the sense that there were at least 2 council members that voted no, that would look favorably upon putting it to the voters. So I'm wondering if we can schedule a work session at some time in the relatively near future. Obviously, it's not going to happen this year because I don't think we've got the time to deal with it this year with all the other work sessions and everything going on. But as Sigvana said, it's something that we really need to take a look at as to how we involve more of the population in government. So maybe sometime in July or August to meet and discuss how we might do that. think it's unfortunate that we didn't pass the ordinance, but that's my opinion. It didn't pass, and that's the will of the council, and so that's how we proceed on that. There was one other thing on the Moonlight Wells permit. I personally hope we can get to a point where we all feel comfortable with the permit, and make sure that the issues are addressed. I'll disclose that when the Moonlight Springs protection area was initially enacted, I was a very vocal opponent to it. As a representative of Bering Straits Native Corp., which is a major landowner in that area. And I still feel that with the proper precautions that some sort of mining should be able to occur. We just need to make sure that it's being done correctly and with the appropriate safeguards. And we don't want to irrevocably spoil that resource and have to spend millions and millions of dollars to develop a new resource the next valley over, 2 valleys over. And that's all I've got.
I think got a few more millions.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Moving on then to mayor's comments. The city manager noted there that we were pleased to have the opportunity to have Mr. Michael Emerson, Senior Arctic Policy Advisor with the U.S. Coast Guard here in town. It was a fun afternoon with him, showing him around and updating him on port activities. And thanks, Joy, for being available on the line for that. I want to thank Marguerite again for her efforts, and I think there were others that were involved too, but Marguerite was kind of the party planner for the retirement we had last week. Last week on the 5th for Dana, my sister-in-law, who was in payroll, personnel, and IT for 28 years. And they gave her a good party, and I think she was pleased. Glenn mentioned this spring cleanup. Tomorrow, we're hoping to iron out some of the very last issues with our sight and sound stuff in here, and so that we can get some phone access and the like that we've been trying to resolve. Mentioned we had the Lieutenant Governor who was here for tourism. I did meet with him as well with Joy just to kind of talk about Nome tourism, and he was very interested in cruise ships. That kept going back to cruise ships, but nonetheless, it was nice to have the Lieutenant Governor visit. I had a message from Colleen Deaton over at Bering Street Housing today that she moved over there to Bering Street Housing and is working on some program that could provide assistance. I'm not sure if it's with rent, but I know that it is with utilities, either past or future. And so give Colleen a call or look at the Bering Street Housing website for information on that. Also, hopefully just about everybody signed up for the Martinstown Health Corporation $100 COVID assistance program that they were offering, where they were directing $100 to folks for either cell phones, electricity, anything for expenses in communication and power to deal with COVID. We got a list today of 430 something people that directed their money to their utility bill, and there was a list that went to Alaska and GCI as well. And I did send on to Bryant, who sent on to Greg Russell, thank you. Some nominations there for background checks to fill these planning, Public Safety Commission seats. And if those happen to come through this week, I will add those to the call for the special meeting so that we can get those appointed and get the people there. And with that,
I had one more thing for recognition.
Yes.
The link that Brian's been sending out about the Nome planning. Is that what it is? Is it still too late to do that?
survey,
Nope, it's not too late.
Survey, okay. You want to put in a plug for that survey?
Yes, the Nome Planning Commission is working on their 2030 comprehensive plan, and they are soliciting your opinion about how Nome is to develop over the next 10 years. So there is a link on Facebook in Nome Announce on the Planning Commission section of the City of Nome website. Please go there. It can take from 10 to 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on how opinionated you are. There are easy click boxes, and there are also places where you can go on at length about your vision for the community.
And if you don't mind my adding, there is going to be a workshop that'll probably be taking place at Old St. Joe's towards the end of this month, and we'll be announcing the dates.
In relation to that survey?
Well, not only in relation to that, but to just talk about, what came out in the survey too.
Okay.
okay.
So I think somebody had a question about that survey.
My question was, is there an age minimum on that?
Age limit?
Minimum.
Minimum, oh.
None stated.
If those kids don't fill it out.
Okay, would somebody please make the motion for executive session as listed on the agenda?
We have to go into executive session for the purpose
Of union.
negotiation?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Reeder, Councilmember Johnson, Mark Johnson, roll call please.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeder.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Will there be a?
Thank you. There will not be action following the session. Thank you all for coming this evening. And can we just sit and move on, or do we need a couple seconds?
No, good.
It's just Doug and he can stay on Zoom, yeah.
The party moved on, I think. There we go. That now. Now hours.
Actually, this should really take you 5 minutes.
Did you survive the prom and Mother's Day weekend? I didn't realize those were together. I was like, oh, poor Trin.
Employed Jamie to change that.
Make sure that they're
Look at
not,
the dates
they don't
next year.
coincide with each other. I felt so bad when I realized that happened. I didn't realize the prom was this year because poor girl.
1 second, we are still streaming to YouTube.